Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Petaluma City Council and Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, March 11th. May we have a roll call, please?
Barnacle,
Present.
Cater Thompson,
Present.
Healy,
Here.
Now,
Here.
Posake,
Here.
Shribs,
Here.
McDonald.
Here. Thank you very much. With all members present, tonight's agenda is to go to closed session, and I'd like to ask our city attorney to advise us on what the closed session matters are.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be happy to do that. The council will have two closed session conferences tonight. Both are regarding existing litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9. The first is a workers' compensation appeal board case number ADJ 17550355. It is entitled Matthew Patterson versus City of Petaluma. The next is a case entitled Bruce Terrell versus City of Petaluma, Petaluma Police Department, Police Chief Ken Savano, etc. That is U.S. District Court case in the Northern District, number 3:22-CV-05411-AMO. Thank you.
And thank you. The council, the public, as always, is invited to make public comments on all materials, including this closed session item. And public comments are limited to 3 minutes. I'd like to ask the clerk if we've seen comments online for tonight's closed session.
We have not received any comments.
And deferring to our moderator, I would ask if anyone is rushing to the podium and we need to read our messaging. But I'm not seeing anyone in the house, nor am I seeing anyone looking for cards. And so with that, we'll declare the closed session, the public comment period for the closed session items to be closed for the evening. And with that, I'd like to invite all of our council to now adjourn to our closed session item. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Petaluma City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, March 11th. If you wish to provide public comments on tonight's agenda, please fill out a speaker card. They're located in the back of the room, just the doorway there, and bring it to our city clerk over here. And now I'd like to invite Monica Aparicio and Maria Galvez to provide information to those who wish to participate in Spanish.
Thank you. Good evening. Hola, me llamo María Galvez y estoy aquí con mi pareja de interpretación, Mónica Aparicio. Estamos hoy aquí como intérpretes. Este evento se llevará a cabo en español y en inglés. Se usarán ambos idiomas activamente, así que usted podrá elegir un canal para participar en su idioma preferido después de que le hayamos explicado cómo funciona la interpretación. Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Después de que termine esta aplicación, se activará la función de interpretación. Si está conectado con su computadora, verá un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Si está conectado con su tableta o con su teléfono, pulse en más y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas. A continuación, elija su canal de idiomas. Gracias. We're ready.
And thank you. I'd like to ask the clerk for a roll call for the evening.
Barnacle,
Present.
Cater Thompson,
Present.
Healy,
Here.
Now,
Here.
Posake,
Here.
Shribs,
Here.
McDonald.
Here. And that's everyone. So let's have our stand and have a pledge of allegiance. We now have a moment of silence. Thank you. And we move to confirming our agenda for the night. That I don't see anyone looking to have an item removed or changed on tonight's agenda, so we'll move right into our report from our closed session, and I'd like to invite our city attorney to make comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no action to report tonight.
Thank you very much. And that moves us into proclamations. And this is always one of our highlights of the evening. Appreciate this. And I'd like to invite Colleen Mahoney, president of the Petaluma Women's Club, and Rebecca Kakis-Wolf, the commissioner on the Sonoma County Commission for the Status of Women, to the podium as I read the proclamation for Women's History Month. Whereas women have played a critical role in shaping the economic, cultural, and social fabric of our society through their participation in the labor force, working both inside and outside the home, in leadership positions, and through creative inspiration. And whereas National Women's History Month provides an opportunity for schools and communities to increase the knowledge held by our children and our community of women's roles in history and their contributions to the development of this nation. And whereas the story of American women is the story of women of all ages, races, cultural backgrounds who led campaigns for equality and civil rights, advanced professional and educational opportunities, founded entirely new enterprises, and contributed significantly to the arts, sciences, and humanistic causes. Whereas, as women from every background have long realized that an uneven playing field will never bring equality or justice, and as members of the families, civic and community groups, businesses, and legislative bodies, women are in the forefront of reevaluating the status quo. And whereas the 2024 theme for National Women's History Month is Women Who Advocate for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which directly recognizes the women throughout the country who understand that for a positive future, we need to eliminate bias and discrimination entirely from our lives and institutions. And whereas National Women's History Month is both a call to acknowledge outstanding women we know by name and to pay homage to the nameless women who shared our collective past. Whereas Petaluma is grateful that our community is well represented by two organizations that passionately advocate for issues impacting women and provide women the space and visibility to make a difference, the Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women and the Petaluma Women's Club, which is approaching a remarkable 130 years since its founding. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Kevin McDonald, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, in recognition of the significant role played by women whose courage and vision inspires hope and possibility for today's women to make tomorrow's history, thereby proclaim the month of March 2024 as National Women's History Month in the city of Petaluma. Congratulations.
Thank you. No, go ahead.
Is it okay if I take a moment?
Please
just
take a moment to
say
make a
few
comment.
words? Sorry, a little bit on the petite side. Really, really thank you so much for the opportunity and time to socialize and to share this, especially at a time where access to healthcare, financial freedoms, and other diversity and equity inclusion items are questioned. We really, really appreciate the joint effort, especially through this county, to support this proclamation. So thank you very much on behalf of the Commission.
And thank you. And we also tonight have our proclamation for Equal Pay Day. And we invite Pam Granger, Public Policy Chair of the Petaluma branch of the American Association of University Women, to the podium as I read the proclamation. Whereas after 60 years, over 60 years after the passing of the Equal Pay Act of 1963, women, specifically minority women, continue to suffer the consequences of unequal pay. Whereas according to the U.S. Census Bureau, women working full-time year-round in 2023 typically earned 84% of what men earned for full-time work and 78% including part-time and seasonal workers. Whereas according to Graduating to a Pay Gap, a 2012 research report by the American Association of University Women, the gender pay gap is evident 1 year after college graduation, even after controlling for factors known to affect earnings. Whereas in 2009, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was signed into law, which gives back to employees their day in court to challenge a pay gap. And now we must pass the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would extend the Equal Pay Act by closing loopholes and providing the law's effectiveness. Whereas a lifetime of lower pay means women have less income to save for retirement and less income counted in Social Security or pension benefit formula. Fair pay strengthens the security of families today and eases future retirement costs while enhancing the American economy. And whereas fair pay equity policies can be implemented simply and without undue cost or hardship in both the public and private sectors. And Tuesday, March 12th, symbolizes the time in 2024 when wages paid to American women catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Kevin McDonald, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, March 12th, 2024 as Equal Pay Day and urge the citizens of Petaluma to recognize the full value of women's skills and significant contributions to the labor force, and further encourage business to conduct internal pay evaluation to ensure women are being paid fairly. Congratulations.
We got to get it while we can. Just also take a second. So tomorrow is Equal Pay Day. As the mayor said, it's the day where women have to work into the following year. In this case, it's March 12th this year to catch up with their male counterparts. So it's not a celebration day. We're very happy that we're represented on a federal level by senators and representatives that have voted in the past and continue to vote for legislation that will hopefully make that be at least legally a thing of the past. So thank you very much for this recognition. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And now we have an additional presentation from staff. I'd like to invite Chelsea Thompson, Deputy Director of Environmental Services, to the podium to initiate this presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, council members and mayor and community members and staff. My name is Chelsea Thompson, Deputy Director of Environmental Services, and I'm happy to be here tonight to recognize two incredible staff members from the Ellis Creek Water Recycling Facility, Brittany Rossi Worthen and Will Crane. Thank you. Brittany and Will both work at Ellis Creek Water Recycling Facility. Brittany is our lab supervisor, and Will is our senior plant mechanic. Last year, Brittany and Will were nominated by Ellis Creek staff for awards sponsored by the CWA, or the California Water Environment Association. CWA is a nonprofit organization made up of over 10,000 professionals in the water and wastewater industry. Brittany received the award for Supervisor of the Year, and Will received the award for Mechanical Technician Person of the Year. Next slide, please. Brittany has been with the city for over 8 years. She's our lab supervisor at the Ellis Creek Water Quality Lab. In the application submitted for Brittany, she was described as a mentor to lab and environmental services staff and was praised for her integrity, commitment, dedication, and the way she treats others. Specific examples of her work and technical abilities include her diligence in updating the Ellis Creek Lab to be compliant with rigorous quality assurance requirements that became effective this year. She keeps Ellis Creek and the lab current and compliant with regulations, and Brittany is collaborative and has developed and led trainings across divisions within the Public Works and Utilities Department. Brittany holds a Laboratory Analyst Grade 4 certification through CWA. She's the current president of the CWA Redwood Empire section, and she's also president of Petaluma's Professional and Mid-Managers Association. She organizes CWA events, including golf tournaments, dinners, and wastewater plant tours. For those of you who don't know Brittany, you should know that she demonstrates a commitment to excellence, takes initiative in her work, volunteers for the betterment of the wastewater industry, and her leadership and mentoring have created a very strong lab and laboratory team at Ellis Creek. Brittany has earned tremendous respect from her coworkers at the City of Petaluma, as well as by other professionals in the wastewater industry. Based on the information in the application, Brittany was named Supervisor of the Year by CWA's Redwood Empire section. Next slide, please. So Will is our senior plant mechanic at Ellis Creek. He's been with the city for 10 and a half years. In the application submitted for Will, he is described as selfless, a strong leader, and as someone who always goes above and beyond. Specific examples of his work and technical abilities include his daily leadership to 3 plant mechanics, streamlining the maintenance workflow at Ellis Creek and creating a paperless work order system. He continually seeks to make improvements to the maintenance management system at Ellis Creek. Will holds 2 CWA certifications, one that's an electrical and instrumentation grade 1 and a mechanical technologist grade 3. Will is hardworking, a strong leader, and dedicated to a positive, fun, and safe working environment. He demonstrates ingenuity and creativity in his approach to challenging projects. He goes above and beyond whenever the need arises. And the photo that's up here shows Will in an excavator clearing vegetation from one of our treatment wetlands at Ellis Creek. Based on the information that application, Will was named Mechanical Technician Person of the Year, not only by CWA's Redwood Empire section, but we just recently learned last week that he was also selected as CWA's 3rd place winner for statewide for Mechanical Technician Person of the Year. And last slide. And these photos are a few of our Ellis Creek team members. The pumpkin in the photo is actually a pumpkin that Will grew at Ellis Creek using recycled water. So Brittany and Will, thank you for the dedication and passion you demonstrate, and congratulations on your awards.
No, I didn't know the costume was going to be posted as the picture. Thank you very much. Go for it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
And thank you. I always appreciate getting a chance to have the public recognize what stellar employees we have here at the city. And let's see. Our next item on the agenda is our general public comment for the evening. And during public comment, the public is invited to make comments on item of public interest that are within the city council's subject matter jurisdiction and that are not listed on the current agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Depending on the number of persons wishing to address the council, time will be allocated in equal shares, totaling no more than 20 minutes. And I think that covers our issues for the evening. Good. I'd like to ask the clerk if we have had public comments coming in online.
We have received 17 public comments, and they're posted on the website.
Wonderful, 17, good. And now I'd like to invite our moderator to read our messaging for the evening.
At this time, I will start a 30-second clock for general public comment. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speakers and viewers.
And this is when I usually look to the back of the room and see if anybody is making a run to the clerk's desk with a comment card. And I'm trying to make sure they all get in before the 30-second clock runs out.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see how many we have. I have 10 cards here for tonight, and with 10 cards, we'll have a 90 seconds for each person. If you would please set the timer at 90 seconds.
Yep.
20 divided by 10 would be a 2-minute. Let's correct that misspeaking part and go to 2 minutes for each person. And I think that'll be fine for tonight at 10.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but I just wanted to, if you excuse me, it looks like Ms. Galvez's hand is up on the panelists. I don't know if she wants to
I'd like
be
to
recognized.
please
That's
jump
one
in.
of our translators.
Right.
She can speak. Ms. Galvez, you can go ahead and speak if you'd like. I'm not.
Maybe your hand's just left up in Zoom. Sorry.
I
Thank you.
appreciate the attention to that. If we do see her hand arise, please get my attention so we get her right away in here. And I do know one thing that translators always like to remind us of is please speak slowly and clearly so they can do accurate translation for us. So with that, our first speaker would be Dan Lynch, and the second speaker would be Sandra Shand.
Hello, my name is Daniel Lynch. I'm still homeless, and I'd like to thank you guys for the format that's provided. I noticed no one's mentioned for the women that they're creators and show us love also. That's a big thing for women. But here nor there, I'm still homeless. It's cold. It's wet out there. Someone threw my blankets away today. I'm pretty upset. It's not going to be a problem. I've already taken care of it pretty much. I'm not sure why you people keep throwing my stuff away or calling the cops on me, but it's happening. Also, I've been cut short this week from collecting my money when I perform my music downtown. I busk on the street, and I was told I had to wrap it up because, well, quite honestly, it was late, they said. Come to find out, they told me I had to have a permit to play music, which I don't. This is a problem for me that the cops would do this to me because I don't know how I'm going to eat now. Not really, but you know what I mean. I've spoken to the cops about it today. I came to the town hall or city hall this morning to find out what the rules are of engagement on this, and there aren't any. I might be considered a public nuisance is what they told me. I'm not sure why art or creativity is considered against the law. I'm just sharing music with people. I'm not sure what the problem was, but honestly, I didn't appreciate it, really. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Shand, to be followed by Luigi Pedrig-Dove.
Hello. Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa said that there is no such thing as neutrality in a genocide. Either you speak up to protect life, to stop mass slaughter, or your silence supports that slaughter. Martin Luther King Jr. quoted President Kennedy when he said, "Mankind will either put an end to war or war will put an end to mankind." the chaos, the violence, the violation of human rights that is spreading out now from the Middle East, literally in this nuclear age, threatens the whole world, including Petaluma. Not to mention the Petalumans who have loved ones in the Middle East. I urge you to eliminate bias and stereotypes from your decisions. I urge you to have the kind of courage and vision you applauded this evening. My fear is that the alternative is that you will sit watching a world self-destruct. And I want you to remember, your silence speaks volumes. It speaks very loudly to all your constituents. It is exactly the kind of silence that enabled the Holocaust in Europe. The student who handed you a resolution for peace at the last meeting, I got a copy of that and I read it. And I ask in the name of all that you consider holy, what was wrong with that? I would like to know what you found objectionable in that.
Thank you. Luigi Petrich-Doe, to be followed by Aaron Oakes.
I just wanted to comment that the hand that was raised was from our interpreter, and just as a reminder to all speakers to speak slowly.
Thank you. Resetting the timer. There we go. Okay.
Hello, City Council members. Mr. Mayor, thank you for your service. I stand here in favor of a ceasefire resolution, which I could read in 2 minutes. It should be published in the Argus Courier this week to show how innocuous it is and really peace-loving rather than accusatory or divisive. What's divisive is not standing against hate, as our placards say. And I am trying to speak slowly for the translators. As Sandra just mentioned, silence in the face of oppression is taking the side of the oppressor. And in this case, we have the rules of engagement not being respected by a regime which does not represent its people and furthermore stands accused of corruption. I believe it's the Leahy Act that prohibits use of funds. But that's the point of my message today, is the funds being used to commit these atrocities belong here. And in fact, there are $3 million being committed this quarter, 1% of the Petaluma budget being committed this quarter to acts of genocide, acts that don't respect the rules of engagement, which every military person, every veteran would just, their blood would boil to know this. Furthermore, this sounds like a drop in the bucket, but to date in the war on terror, which failed to unseat the Taliban, $1.2 billion has been spent by the residents of Petaluma.
Thank you very much for your comments. Aaron Oakes to be followed by Ravel Mast.
I've lived in Petaluma almost my entire life. My family, the Oakes family, has lived a block away from City Hall since 1969. And I just want to say that our taxes are funding the murder of civilians, and it's important for us as taxpayers to take a position on the way that our tax dollars are being spent. And I feel like it is very important for all of us to take a stand on this issue that everyone is going to continue to come and talk to you about every single month, every single week. We are going to keep coming back, and we want you to take a stand and tell us what you think about the way that your taxes are being spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ravel Mast, to be followed by Michael Tazzoni.
Hello, City Council, City of Petaluma. I don't know the number for how many Palestinians are dead at this point. I recently found this website, I think it's like ceasefireprojections.org or something, and it includes some projections of the number of people whose lives are at risk in Gaza if we continue on the trend that we are going. And within the next 6 months, 100,000 more may be dead. By not acting, you are enabling that. I don't know how to put it any more clearly than that. City of Petaluma, again, there is the vigil and rally every Saturday from 2 to 3:30 in Putnam Plaza. On Sundays, there is the weekly protest and community circle in which we come together and protest and be visible, and then we come together in a large circle and share our stories. Jewish people, Palestinian people, folks like me who are just part of the community. I encourage you to come out to those actions. I also encourage people in the community to donate to Unite in Humanity and the Palestinian Children Relief Fund. As well, there are local families in Sonoma County whose family members are in Gaza and need help getting their families out of Gaza away from the genocide. My friends and I raised $10,000 a week ago to help get some family members of the folks that own Falafel Hut in Santa Rosa. Anywho, thank you.
Thank you. Michael Tazzoni, to be followed by Insa Sweeney.
Hi there. My name is Michael Tatone. I work here in Petaluma, and I'm here to support you passing a ceasefire resolution. I urge you to do it. The time is late. Since the last meeting on February 26th, there have been 1,688 people killed in Gaza. That's the price of inaction. And a resolution here might not stop the violence in Gaza directly, but our federal officials sure aren't listening to us. And it would really help if people of conscience stood up right now. And I understand that at the last meeting, there were 71 comments written and spoken in support of a ceasefire resolution. There were only 5 against. It was over 90% support. So please listen and hear the community that's speaking up, and please get a ceasefire resolution passed. It is too late. Many people are going to die even if there was a ceasefire today, from sickness, from hunger, and the occupation will continue. And the way things are going, this could happen again. So we need every voice to stand up and be as strong as possible. Stand up to where U.S. tax dollars are going. Stop the violence abroad. This is something that every U.S. citizen and every resident of the United States and every resident of the world, but especially us, because our money is invested in this, we all need to stand up against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Insa Sweeney, to be followed by David Saul.
Good evening. It's Jason Sweeney, by the way. Terrible handwriting. So thank you for taking my comment tonight. I just wanted to bring it back to center that what's happening right now in Gaza and the West Bank is a moral issue. And that moral issue draws a straight line from Gaza and the West Bank and the harm being done to those of us supporting it with our tax dollars, which means all of us. If we want peace and justice and safety, we need to stop doing harm. We are all standing on the shoulders of someone or many someones. Take your pick: the 40-hour work week, the civil rights movement, the ending of apartheid in South Africa. We celebrate and sanctify these as moral victories for humanity. And they all involved forms of resistance and violence before they were resolved. It's terrible. I have real concerns with the community here in Sonoma County that we're encountering. I think it's important to understand the people that are standing in the way of these calls for peace. We're asking to unite as a community, right, and put forth a ceasefire resolution and say that we want peace and we want our elected officials at the federal level to understand that and hear that louder. There are people in this room right now who have called other Jewish people anti-Semitic just because they have a different view on the rights on the human rights that are deserved by all. And that is anti-Semitism. It is also a disingenuous and hurtful attack on another Jewish person's character. It's also important to observe the things that are not being said. We must stay centered in the truth and be very careful to who we give credence or credibility to. If Petaluma stands united against hate, I think it's important to call out the conditional community that we are seeing all over the county for what it is.
Thank you very much. David Saul, to be followed by Stuart Nissenbaum.
Good evening. The Jewish Community Relations Council has been committed to protecting the Bay Area Jewish community from anti-Semitism and targeted violence for the last 75 years. Last night, I attended the JCRC's 75th anniversary gala in San Francisco. In order to get into the hotel for the event, we had to pass through a mob of ceasefire protesters. They screamed at us. They called us anti-Semites. It was intimidating and threatening. And as State Senator Wiener tweeted today, so here we are, targeting a major Jewish event and thinking it's okay. These ceasefire resolutions are camouflaged as motivated by a concern for the innocent Palestinian civilians. Underneath the camouflage, this is about supporting a radical Islamic jihadi terrorist threat to the one democracy in the Middle East and to the Jewish people around the world. I want to show you this headline from last week's Wall Street Journal. Hamas leaves Gaza talks with no ceasefire deal. Militant group's leader in Gaza believes Hamas has upper hand as splits emerge between Israel and U.S. These ceasefire protests and resolutions are directly encouraging Hamas to continue its campaign of terror. It doesn't matter how carefully the language is massaged, a city council resolution sends the message to Hamas to keep up the fight. Imagine if the passion on the other side had been directed at condemning Hamas, demanding the release of innocent civilians that Hamas took hostage, putting pressure on the Red Cross to demand access to the hostages, demanding that the UN immediately investigate the barbaric sexual violence of October 7th. Imagine what this headline might have said. By now, I believe Hamas would have surrendered and released the hostages. Instead, these protesters are emboldening Hamas with their protests and calls for ceasefire.
Thank you very much, Stuart Nissenbaum, to be followed by Matt McGuire.
Stuart Nissenbaum, thank you for allowing me to speak. Release the hostages, and maybe Hamas steps down from its leadership position and we'll have a ceasefire. How many of you really believe or still believe that Israel's response to October 7th would not be what it was? I mean, Hamas had to understand, they had to know what Israel's response would be, yet they went ahead and they perpetrated this horrible attack on 1,200 or so innocent people. How many still believe that Hamas still wants a ceasefire? They certainly don't show it. If they showed it, they would come to the table, they would release the hostages, but that doesn't happen. I think it's up to the city council to not resolve anything that doesn't severely condemn Hamas's position in this war. So I urge you, no ceasefire resolution.
Thank you. Matt McGuire, and that would be our last card of the evening. Thank you.
Last week I sat next to, or the last meeting I sat next to Herb Petrowski, who told me that the mass murder going on in Gaza is not a genocide because they are all Hamas. This propaganda you just heard from the last two speakers is a bunch of lies. Now the babies are starting to starve. The mass starvation is starting to happen. And it's on your taxes are paying for it. Since the IDF gets 70 to 85% of its armaments from our government, you're paying for it. Are you okay with starving babies? If you're okay with that, then don't put this on the agenda. Don't speak to it, and don't let your community have a say. 2 minutes, 1 minute is not enough. This is an issue that is burning up this community, and you guys as our representatives need to hold a forum. I get it. It's hard. It's painful. We're going to have people in grave disagreement. But this needs to happen. The longer you don't put this on the agenda, the more the distrust and the anger will continue to foment. Now, you need to show some integrity, put it on, even if you disagree. If you want to tell the lies like that, then let's make your case in public, right? But let's also let the public address those lies. It is time to put this on the agenda. Up until recently, I thought it was going to be agendized. I had a very good conversation with John today when he explained why he had changed his position, and I've asked him to support putting this on the agenda along with Dennis. The only two people who have really stood up and said, something constructive about this horrible situation. Now, if you want to be silent, then you are complicit in the worst moral issue, certainly of this century, and potentially for hundreds of years. The slaughter going on now is an industrial level of slaughter, and our government is making it happen. We are enabling it, and it needs to.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I don't believe we have that opportunity for you this evening. So we'll now move to our next item. Thank you. And now that concludes our public comment for the evening. And we move to our next item, which is council comments. And I'd like to invite our Vice Mayor, John Shribs, to lead us off on our council comments tonight.
Thank you. I do have a short speech here a little bit because we do have this elephant in the room we need to at least discuss or at least talk about, at least affirm what's being asked of us. Personally, I'm very upset with both the Israeli leadership and the Hamas leadership mistakes, and they're all both doing the wrong thing. But I want to put things in perspective. In addition to historical conflicts, more currently, tens of thousands have been killed and millions are now being displaced in each of these ongoing conflicts: Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine, and Gaza. In our very near future, climate change and competition for the diminishing resources is going to cause death and probably displacement of probably billions of people. That's coming probably in our lifetime. Recently, all the council members have communicated with many people and done research about the current conflict and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We understand that the international conflict impacts us here at home and within our local communities, and we share your suffering. Our current U.S. leadership is calling for a ceasefire, and humanitarian aid is happening to the civilians in Gaza, and I know our government is working on that right now as actively as they possibly can. And they're doing this after listening to all of our collective voices. So I want to at least submit that there is a letter, a ceasefire letter on the Sonoma County website It's from our Human Rights Commission for the county. And so I want to make sure that there's some, I'm going to deliver it over to the folks so that, on the clerk, so that it gets on published, that this is also part of us. This is our representative body. This is our local representation on this issue. So I want to just read some of the comment. There's some key statements within this document that I just want to express. Make sure that it's clear that this is already out on the Human Rights by Sonoma County Commission. The impact of armed conflict reverberates through generations. We understand that healing begins with a collective commitment to ending violence in all its forms. Later on in the paragraph, the Sonoma County Commission on Civil Rights calls upon all conflicting parties to unite in building bridges between communities, championing protections for all humans, regardless of any descriptor, and advocating for an end of armed conflicts worldwide. Next, other paragraph, it says, we condemn war, genocide, and terrorism. The end of that paragraph says, the Geneva Conventions emphasize a moral and ethical obligation to protect innocent lives during conflicts. Continuing, we condemn all terrorists. We call for the release of all hostages. We call for a ceasefire. The only way to find the beginnings of peace is through a ceasefire, a suspension of fighting, so that peace talks may take place and humanitarian aid can reach those in need. And then more words, but then finally finishes up. We call upon our community to build bridges of peace, love, and healing locally. So personally, I believe in a sustainable social and physical environment is needed by all living creatures. And I do ask our federal government to do the right thing in the face of all regional conflicts and work toward a goal of world peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cater Thompson.
Thank you. I'm just going to state that I write the president and I let him know how I feel about what's going on, and that's the direction that I'll go, and I feel like other people should do the same thing. You can write every single day, and just so happened that I wrote the next day Kamala Harris says something addressing the Middle East, and then the president did. And I believe that we should, and that's all I'm going to say. But I do want to say I was at my SCTA meeting today. It was really long, and I am now on the, let me get my notes. And I'm going to be on the executive committee of that also, and another transportation committee for SCTA, because it's so important that we make sure that we get our fair share and projects that we want started and completed in Petaluma for safety. Other things, I had my groundwater meeting, which was, I should have talked about that last week, but I basically had a seminar to just be updated on the groundwater. And fortunately, Petaluma is getting a lot of money for recycled pipelines. And so that seems, so what's happening at the groundwater is we are trying to determine how many wells need to be built to see whether salt is in the wells, and how, and recharge is what we're looking at also. And that's all I'm going to say tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Barnacle.
Yes. Speaking on the terrible events in the Middle East, I'm disgusted by it. I don't think it's a council action. But I'm disgusted by it. I'm disgusted by what Hamas did. I'm disgusted by Israel's response. I think it's, and I don't even like calling it Israel, I think it's the Israeli government. I prefer to focus on the government because I don't think either people in general support what's going on over there. Nobody wants innocent people to die. So I certainly don't. I've also had several different liaison appointments in the last week. Sonoma Clean Power. The good news is our mid-year budget update shows that our forecasted revenues are going to be up $36 million. Our costs are going to be down $7 million, which is going to result in about $60 million in ratepayer benefits in terms of lower rates, a $12 million investment fund for communities, and $4 million for customer programs. So if you have thoughts about how to use the Community Investment Fund to generate returns for Sonoma Clean Power and community benefits, really appreciate any ideas you have. We're going to be discussing that more, but welcome your creative ideas as well. We also heard about the criteria that Sonoma Clean Power uses for sponsorships, and I'll be sending that out to the council after this meeting. We had our PBAC meeting, or Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee meeting. We got a presentation from committee member Bond on her project with Blue Zones in Napa County. And it was a Safe Routes to School quick build demonstration that was pretty darn inspiring, with about 30 community members that were participating in it. And when I asked how many city staff people were there, she said 0. So it was really interesting to see a truly community-led effort to build safe routes to school. We also reviewed the Caulfield Bridge and the mobility improvements that are going to be needed to really make that safe and keep traffic calmed. We looked at the proposed improvements at Howard Street during the repaving project that's going to be going on there in the next year, and gave feedback on that. And we saw the mapping from the Safe Streets nomination program. There was over 500 different nominations that were there and across like 240 different locations in the city, which was really heartening to see, sort of a smattering of things across the west side, and then, as you'd expect, over on the east side, really sort of focusing on arterials and collector streets. And then also had an Air District meeting where we went through their legislative update, and we talked about what bills the Air District is going to be opposing and supporting and sponsoring. And then probably the most heartwarming thing I did in the last week was I had a chance to judge the Press Democrat at the Youth Service Awards. There was one student from each high school in Sonoma County that was nominated for their exemplary service, and we actually had multiple Petaluma residents that were not even in Petaluma City Schools that were there, and it was just, as gloomy as the world is right now, that made me feel like we've still got a bright future ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Posake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see. I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to our entire homeless provider community for everyone coming together to help take up the slack on the bankruptcy of Social Advocates for Youth. I also want to mention that the Board of Supervisors tomorrow is taking up a declaration of a racism emergency in the county, which I've sent a note in support of, and I urge others who feel the same way to do the same. That'll be at 1 o'clock if anyone wants to go in person. And finally, I'm still in support of a resolution requesting search for a ceasefire in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't have any meetings, a whole week without meetings since our last meeting, but I did meet with numerous people from our community on numerous subjects. And I also attended the Petaluma American Little League opening day ceremonies and 2 games in the afternoon with 2 of my grandsons. So baseball is back in Petaluma, and it was very exciting to see so much community out there supporting these athletes. A final reminder, Veteran Egg Days Parade entries must be received by March 12th. If not, the late entries get a late fee until the deadline of March 18th. This year's parade is April 20th, and the theme is Greener Pasture, Sustaining Petaluma's Future. For more information on vendor applications, sponsorship, or volunteer opportunities, the website is veteraneggs.org. petaluma.com. The parade marshal this year is a personal friend and family friend, Michael Deacon, aka Bug, the owner of Heritage Salvage here in Petaluma. And our good egg, I'm very proud to be 1995's good egg, but this year, 2024, is Faith Ross, and it couldn't have gone to a better individual. Congratulations to both. Petaluma is having a downtown cleanup day, and everybody's invited to donate some hours on March 19th, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The tasks include graffiti and sticker removal, trash pickup, planter beautification, community bonding while cleaning up our downtown. Show pride in our city. I can't think of a better way to come together as a community. Snacks and beverages will be provided, and this is presented by our Business Improvement District, otherwise known as our BID. For more information, contact the Petaluma Downtown Association, located in our Visitor Center on Washington Street. And just to let the community know, I will always support peace in the world, in our community, and I taught it in the classroom for 30 plus years, and I will continue teaching it, and look forward to the day we can have peace on earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy?
Thank you. Just two things briefly. I was able to attend the annual meeting of the Petaluma Downtown Association last Wednesday. There was a massive presence by city staff there, I have to say. It was really, really impressive. But we had a very robust discussion around issues affecting downtown, empty storefronts, graffiti, policing, parking, and on and on and on. So we have a very engaged merchant base, and it was a really positive meeting. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is I couldn't help but notice during public comment tonight that the television feed was never on the speaker. It was just a time clock. And the television feed gets to see my smiling face right now, but I think it's really disrespectful of the public not to have a camera on that podium when the public is speaking at public comment or during meetings. And I don't know if that's a staff issue or a PCA issue, but I'd really like to see that fixed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I guess my comments tonight will focus on our public in the audience. And I do want everyone to know, to hear messaging that this council has put forward before about how powerful your voices are when you come and speak, and how it is televised to all of our community. And reiterating, writing to the president or other federal level officials. I think everyone is concerned. I'd like to read from the County Board of Supervisors, the chairman's comments, I believe back in October, might be November, and it says, we can certainly feel the passion in the room and appreciate the depth of emotion and opinion surrounding the topic. They are valid and warranted. The terror, violence, and trauma endured by Palestinians and Israelis since October 7th is unfathomable. The humanitarian emergency in Gaza is horrific, with the UN calling it apocalyptic. Apocalyptic. I'm just tongue-tied tonight. And my heart goes out to the many Sonoma County residents, both Jewish and Muslim, who have personal and familial connections to the region. And that was at some time ago. And we've all been seeing the situation continue worse. But I am encouraged now to hear the President of the United States comments regarding ceasefire, to hearing the Vice President, our former California Senator, comments on that, and messages of peace coming from all parts of the community. And that reaffirms my belief in where solutions arise. And also it reaffirms my opinion that that is not a city council matter. It is a personal matter for each of us to carry that position. And thank you very much. I will now pass to the city manager for her report for the evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and community. Next week, Council will receive the inaugural report from our independent police auditor. And prior to the council meeting, I'd like to invite everyone from the community, council, staff to a reception prior to the council meeting, starting at 5:15 to 6:15 out here in the foyer. A chance to meet and greet our independent police auditors, talk about their report, and engage them directly. Copies of the report and light refreshments will be provided. And that concludes my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And that goes, let's see, that takes us to our consent calendar for the evening. And I'm looking up and down the dais to anybody with a change in the consent, no change in the consent calendar order. And does the council have any questions on the consent calendar? And not seeing any questions on it, I'd like to ask the clerk if we've had any public comments on the consent calendar.
No comments were received.
And I'd like to open the public comment period on the consent calendar with our moderator reading our messaging for the evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers.
And I think we need a clock posted there for 30 seconds, but I am not seeing anyone moving towards the table to fill out a comment card on the consent calendar. And with that, I will call the consent public comment period for the consent calendar closed with no comments in the chamber. And bring it back to council or on the dais here. Last comments, or Councilmember Healy.
Yeah, I'd be happy to move the consent calendar items 1 through 4.
Thank you. And a second by Councilmember Now. And I'd like to ask the clerk for a roll call vote on that.
Barnacle,
Aye.
Cater Thompson,
Aye.
Healy,
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes. And that was unanimous passing there. And so the next item, item 5, is a matter of public hearing, matter for consideration. This is an introduction of an ordinance, first reading for the City Council, approving acquisition of a portion of a parcel located at 400 Hopper Street and disposition of a portion of a parcel located at 6 Copeland Street. That's between the McNear Channel and Hopper Street, and granting authority to the city manager to provide an emergency vehicle access for the approved Oyster Cove development over a portion of land located at 400 Hopper Street. And for this, I'd like to introduce our planning manager, Andrew Triple, to take it away here.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the council. Just a moment, I'll go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, great. Thank you for your patience. Item 5 this evening is the land acquisition and disposition, as well as emergency vehicle access provision. It's a City Council public hearing for the properties located off Hopper Street. A portion of the property is owned by the city of Petaluma, and another portion of the property is currently owned by Vulcan Materials. And so what brings us here this evening in terms of the regulatory context is Petaluma City Charter, Section 46, which requires the City Council take action to approve the acquisition or disposition of property valued at $3,000 or greater, as well as Government Code 65402, subsection A, which requires that the Planning Commission make a determination of conformity, with the city's general plan prior to any acquisition or disposition of real property. On May 23rd, 2023, Planning Commission did make such a conformity determination, finding that the acquisition and disposition of the subject properties would be in conformance with the general plan. The City Attorney's Office has advised us that as a charter city, this may not be a requirement. However, it was done, and it doesn't hurt that it was done. But in the future, this may not. You may not see this similar action of a conformity determination by the Planning Commission. And so this evening's public hearing is a request for approval and authorization. The approval to acquire approximately a 0.2 acre portion of a property located between the McNear Channel and Hopper Street that's currently owned by Vulcan, and to dispose of a 0.10 acre portion of a property currently owned by the city that's situated between Vulcan Materials land and the McNear Canal. And then finally, to authorize the city manager to act to provide emergency vehicle access across what would become then the city's land for the benefit of the Oyster Cove development. And so we can see here we have the larger circled area is currently a public use. However, the property ownership is Vulcan Materials. And then in the smaller circled area, we see an industrial use of land on property that is owned by the city. The city's property, including Steamer Landing Park, is highlighted in the orange property boundary and does run adjacent to McNear Canal, around the canal, and then over towards the Hopper Street area. And so the land acquisition here, zooming in, the acquisition of 0.2 acres, which would add to the city-owned property and allow access to Hopper Street, and then the disposition of 0.1 acres, which would be conveyed to Vulcan Materials for their use as part of their industrial operation at Hopper Street. And so here we see in total the proposed lot line adjustment that would be executed following the conveyance of the grant through the grant deeds. Again, looking at the lot line adjustment number 1 for the city's acquisition of 0.2 acres, and then lot line adjustment number 2 for the city's disposition of 0.1 acres to Vulcan Materials. The acquisition of approximately 0.2 acres would allow for the city to own the property, the underlying property across which the river trail currently runs, connecting to Hopper Street. So as we see to the left, at present, while the river trail, which is a Class 1 trail, does cross Vulcan land, it does so without the benefit of a public access easement. So this land exchange would result in correcting that and ensuring that the river trail has complete access to Hopper Street across city-owned property. And then second, the city's exchange of land to Vulcan Materials would allow Vulcan to continue operation on land that is currently owned by the city, as shown in the right side. As we look towards the future, we find that should the Vulcan property redevelop, the requirement for a river trail that's currently shown in the general plan and the river access and enhancement plan would continue to be a requirement, and any redevelopment would be subject to implementing that river trail. And so then we see here both the existing and proposed trail network. that runs along both the Petaluma River as well as the Vulcan property. And circled in the area is the area for acquisition and disposition of the subject portions of land. A second benefit of the land exchange would be emergency vehicle access for Oyster Cove. In fall of 2023, when City Council approved Phase 1 entitlements for Oyster Cove, including a general plan amendment, a rezoning, and a tentative subdivision map, a condition of approval was that there be a secondary point of access, and that preferred secondary point of access is from Hopper Street. With the acquisition of the Vulcan land by the city, a emergency vehicle access point could be created over the river trail. There would be improvements that would be constructed as part of the Oyster Cove development that would allow for emergency vehicle access across or on top of the river trail should it be needed. And then here we can see an example of what that emergency vehicle access would look like, as it would. Emergency vehicle may leave Hopper Street and then continue on along a river trail and then connect into the Oyster Cove development. Through a series of bollards or gates, private vehicles would be excluded from accessing this area. However, bicyclists, pedestrians, and other smaller motorized vehicles that use the river trail would be able to access this area. And this is, I do want to point out, this is at a conceptual design stage. Really, it's a proof of concept to demonstrate that this secondary point of access could be achieved to the satisfaction of the fire department. As part of the design development work that Oyster Cove is currently doing through its required site plan and architectural review process, they would more fully develop this design to include construction details as well. In terms of CEQA, the project was found to be subject to CEQA. However, there's a general finding that there would be no impact to the environment as a direct result of the land exchange, and also CEQA exemption, categorical exemption for the minor changes to land use. And so with that, planning and the city attorney, staff recommend the introduction of an ordinance, first reading of the City Council of Petaluma, approving the acquisition of a 0.21 acre portion of land located between McNear Channel and Hopper Street, the disposition of a 0.10 acre portion of land located between the McNear Channel and the existing Vulcan Shamrock facility, and then authorizing the city manager to act to provide emergency vehicle access to the approved Oyster Cove development over the portion to be acquired. And staff are available, including Assistant City Attorney Dylan Brady, as well as City Engineer Kent Carruthers, if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. Vice Mayor Shribs, question?
Sort of a question on this. What I didn't see was an actual human eye view point of the two spots. And since I went out and walked it, and it's really clear when you walk it how essential this exchange needs to be, and it's wonderful that you're doing this. But the question I have, just for public interest, because the Shamrock has been using that particular corner for many, many years, and the parcel that we're going to acquire has been used by the public for many, many years, because you look at the trail and say, okay, it's been used quite a bit. I remember my dad, being English, talked about walking trails like after 7 years, and even there's things about irrigate. If you've irrigated and do things for 7 years straight, nobody complains about it, it becomes yours. So is there any old laws in place here that it's already established legally that it's really like ours because we have public use of it, as well as they basically have ownership because we haven't complained in the last 50 years? So are those old laws apply here or not? Just those are old English laws, I just remember.
Yeah, I would say, I think the law you're maybe referring to is adverse possession, and typically one of the requirements of adverse possession is the paying of taxes. And one nice thing about being a public entity is you can't adverse possess against the city or whatever that agency is. So we're good there. I think there is an argument that we have developed some sort of easement over the property, but it's nice now to get that all legalized.
Very good. Yeah, I'm totally in agreement. It's getting all legal and put to bed and make sure it's all ours is fine. That access is absolutely essential for the Oyster Cove, for the fire department to get into that location from that side. Otherwise, it's restricted to only one side, one location in. So absolutely, we need to do this. Thank you.
Councilmember Cater Thompson.
I guess I'll just follow what Council or Vice Mayor Shribs stated. I just want to thank staff and Vulcan actually for working this out. It took a long time because it came through the Planning Commission like 3 times. And, the fact that, Riverfront was a single lane in and single lane out, and now we're dealing with Caulfield there, the importance of safety of vehicles being able to get in and out at 2 accesses for any developments that we do. And that is it. So I just want to thank staff and Vulcan for really working together because it was not easy.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy, a question?
Yeah, just very briefly, and in response to Councilmember Shrib's comment, I think even if there was adverse possession over the former Shamrock parcel there, it would only go to bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and now we need it for emergency vehicle access, so it's really good to clean this up. And I want to thank staff for pursuing a rather complicated set of issues here, and to Vulcan for cooperating with us on this.
Thank you. And there's a connection with Open Space District I noted in the report, and a timing. Could you help us with what the timing with the Open Space District is, or whether this can all proceed without concern for the Open Space District timing?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you, Mayor. Also, and Mr. Brady had whispered to me that we do want to acknowledge and reiterate that Vulcan's support for this land exchange. The cost to the city is really the staff time to bring this before you, and then subsequent deed work to execute the land exchange. So there was no requirement for compensation for the city's acquisition of the land. With regard to the conservation easement, the existing portion of land owned by the city is, of course, subject to the conservation easement, and with the lot line adjustment with the acquisition of the new property, the new area would also become subject to the conservation easement. That would require an amendment of the easement to change the boundary. The city has been working with the Agriculture and Open Space District for quite some time on a broader set of amendments to the conservation easement. And we've been working very closely with Ag and Open Space on the boundary amendment as well. In talking with Patrick Carter today, we feel that the amendments will be prepared to come before council later this spring.
Vice Mayor Shribs?
That just brings up a question on once we have it legally exchanged with Oyster Cove going in, the property right there in that location, besides the path on either side of it, there's a few feet of open space. Are we going to try and work with the Open Space District to landscape that properly with native plants, or should we talk to Oyster Cove, or the city needs to come in and do some work to actually beautify that particular entrance?
That's a great question as well. There, I believe, is a restoration requirement within the conservation easement. So I think that the Ag and Open Space would support restoration of the land, but it would be something that we would want to talk with Oyster Cove and then the city through the city manager to look at how that might be executed.
Yeah, I would just like to support that. We do need to, with Oyster Cove going in, we need to beautify that entrance there and make sure that happens along with the whole project, one way or another.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you. I'd like to open it up to public comment at this time. And I'd like to ask our city clerk if we received any cards or letters, fan club, email on this item.
Not on this item.
None on this item. And now I'd like to ask our clerk, our moderator, to read our messaging and set our timer for this.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers.
And I do not see folks rushing to the table to fill out cards and bring to the clerk, who's over here. And with that, and seeing no motion, I will close public comment for the evening and bring it back up to council. Council Member Cater Thompson.
I was just going to make the motion.
So motion by Cater Thompson and a second by Posake. And I would like to comment that we appreciate Vulcan's cooperation in this matter. The Oyster Cove development provides a certain new vision for the city and new vitality in the area, and the cooperation of Vulcan will really help bring that to its best new vision for the city. So thanks to both parties for being able to work this out. And I'd like to see a roll call vote from the clerk, please.
Barnacle,
Aye.
Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, staff. Great presentation. Our next item for the evening is a resolution accepting the annual housing element progress report for the 2023 calendar year and authorizing staff to submit the report to California Department of Housing and Community Development and the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. Helping us with our housing issue tonight and always is our Assistant Director of Community Development, Karen Shimizu.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council members, City Manager, and members of the community. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation and present to you this evening. So the item before you tonight is the Housing Element Progress Report as it relates to the Housing Element implementation. What we're going to be talking about is the first year that we're going to be reporting for the sixth cycle of the Housing Element. So we're now reporting from the 2023 to the 2031 Housing Element that was just recently adopted and approved by the state. Just to highlight, Petaluma's regional housing need allocation by 2031 is 1,910 units, and that will be spread over the 4 different income categories of very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income. There's a comprehensive staff report as well as the HCD annual report with all the details, but the presentation tonight will be kind of focused on our higher level accomplishments. We're going to be starting with what is RHNA, the definitions as they relate to this report, and the flow of the reporting. Sarah Wolf, our housing specialist who's with us this evening, will be kind of diving more into the data. We're going to briefly talk about the relationship between our Homeless Services strategic plan and our housing accomplishments to date. Highlight the city's accomplishments with our ADU program, and then a brief look at looking ahead as it relates to housing funding and production. Next slide. We thought it was important just to spend a few minutes on what is RHNA. So it's the housing production goals assigned by the state for housing production based on income levels on the 4 income categories. The report that HCD requires us is really focused on the timeline of housing development in the city and not fully comprehensive, but it tracks the progress in 2 key areas: approved applications and building permits. And again, this report is only focused for the period of the calendar year 2023, or what we're referring to as the catch-up period of June 30th, 2022 to January 30th, 2023. Please note the state report refers to fully entitled projects as applications. Since the city has a 2-phase approval process, Projects that submitted applications but are not fully entitled are not included in the calendar year report. I just wanted to highlight that. If a project is issued a building permit, it is then counted toward the city's RENA allocation. That's how that's calculated. Staff has reviewed and confirmed the above definitions as it relates to the HCD Excel report, and that is why the numbers may seem a little low, but Sarah's going to talk a little bit more about the details. Sarah?
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the above table represents a high-level breakdown by income level of the city's RENA progress measured by building permits issued. The second column, titled 2022-2023, is known as Karen mentioned, the catch-up period. This period spanned June 30th, 2022 through January 30th, 2023. And within this period, the city permitted a total of 287 units across the 4 income categories. The third column, labeled 2023, shows a total of 108 permitted units across all 4 income categories. The fourth column, total to date, adds together the catch-up period of the 5th cycle, 2022-2023, and the full calendar year of 2023 between all 4 income categories. And the city had permitted 395 units, which is over 20% progress towards its RENA in the very first reporting year of the 6th cycle.
Can I ask a question at this point while this graphic is still up? So in the staff report, it says that the current RENA cycle starts in 2023, and in here it looks like we're counting projects that were permitted in 2022. Can you square that circle for me?
Yes, good catch. So how RENA had decided to, Karen, the 5th cycle essentially gave a grace period for jurisdictions to catch up and count their RENA into the next cycle. So the 5th cycle, between the dates of June 30th, 2022 through January 30th, 2023, essentially we're allowed to count whatever was permitted in that period into the 6th cycle RENA. You're welcome.
And excuse me, I think we got a couple of questions, and if it's okay. Councilmember Pozike.
While we're on that, I had a question. So the 2023 numbers do not include January. They're only for 11 months. Is that the case?
That's right. They're from the end of, from basically February 1st. Yes.
And my question, do the 5th cycle numbers change? Did we back some of these out of the 5th cycle?
No, we did not. So we just carried forward through the catch-up period into the 6th cycle.
And I'm looking at this slide, so I'll ask the second question. And so we have completed 20% of 8 years' work in 1 year.
Yes, that's correct.
That's a two-edged sword. That's got good and bad written all over it. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you. So continuing. Into the total to date columns, you'll notice that the very low and low income categories, the city has also made very solid progress. The first year we've achieved 12% of our RENA allocation for low and nearly 17% for the very low income category. And then just to kind of bring the human element into these income categories, a person considered very low income is a family of 3, a single parent perhaps with 2 kids making about $56,000 a year. A low income household would be a family of 4 earning $100,000 a year, and a moderate household would be a family of 4 earning less than $153,000 a year. Next slide, please. As Karen previously mentioned, the Housing Element Progress Report focuses on the jurisdiction's progress towards its RENA allocation, using the dates for entitlements fully completed and building permits issued, as well as certificates of occupancy. And there are scenarios that you will not see certain significant projects reflected in this annual report. For example, above the Haven at Deer Creek, the project required 2 phases of entitlements due to a rezoning, and it has completed phase 1 of its entitlements, but based on the Housing Element Progress Report reporting requirements, it hasn't received all approvals necessary for issuance of a building permit, so we can't include it on the report. Similarly, you'll see any project under construction would likely have been issued a permit in a prior year. Therefore, based on the reporting requirements, projects under construction would likely not be seen on this report as well. So to that, there are several major residential development projects currently in the pipeline. Many are in the entitlement process, and some are currently in construction or recently completed. The North River apartment complex, now renamed La Via Luxury Apartments, was issued certificates of occupancy in March 2023. This is on the RENA report for this year. However, the project next to it, Mid-Pence 414, it's 100% of affordable housing, 42 units, and that would not be reflected on this year's report. It's under construction and planned to be completed this spring, so you'll see it on next year's report, most likely as a certificate of occupancy. Some projects you can expect to see on next year's report that will be counted towards our RENA are the Oyster Cove project, as you're familiar with, 134 units of market rate housing, Spirit Living, which is 136 units of independent assisted living, and then Mid-Pence Washington Commons, another 100% affordable project with 52 units of low to very low affordable housing. And with that, I'll give it over to Karen to discuss our homeless services strategic plan as it relates to housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to take a moment and highlight how our homeless services strategic plan in our housing production is tied together. So a key element in the plan is ensuring there are affordable housing units in the pipeline to serve our community members, essentially, if we have them, providing a pathway from shelter to longer-term housing solutions. So if you take a look at the housing, affordable housing that we currently have in the pipeline, or projects like River City and Montero that have already been built and completed, all the way to Washington Commons, which is probably the furthest down the line in the pipeline. That's a total of like 389 affordable housing units. Those all aren't counted against this cycle of RENA. But the key thing there is that within those 389 units, we have 119 units of permanent supportive housing that's been integrated in with those developments, which is about 30%. So that's pretty key in serving our community's members that are going from a shelter situation into housing, because most of those, if not all of those permanent supportive housing units come with housing vouchers from the county. So it means that when people move in, they pay 30% of their adjusted gross income towards rent. So they're very affordable in serving our community members that had previously been, unsheltered living in the community. Next slide. Oops, next one, sorry. There we go. I just want to take a moment to kind of highlight the differences in how the city was able to count our ADU production within the community. So the city in this last calendar year in 2023 permitted 24 units and issued COs for 19. The key difference is in the 5th cycle RENA allocation, we were only allowed to count our ADUs towards moderate income units. And with this round in the 6th cycle, the state is allowing the city, even though they are not deed restricted, to go ahead and count those across the income levels. So 30% of those units would be allocated to very low, 30 to low, 30 to moderate, and 10% above moderate. So it's important to keep in mind that as the city focuses on increasing our ADU production within the city, that is also helping us meet those affordable, lower income units, affordable goals. Next slide. So in summary, we're off to a good start in working towards meeting the RHNA allocation. Just highlighting the total number of units, permanent supportive housing units we have coming online. But I also wanted to highlight that, and the way we do that, I just kind of did, it's not exact figures, but it's estimates, that through those 389 units, that the city invested a total amount of funding of about $6.8 million. And that was in either loans or in land dedication. But that in the city and working in partnership with our development community through state and county applications for funding, we were able to bring in an additional $46 million that helped subsidize those developments. A couple really large grants on that was the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities for the Danco project in about $30 million. And then our Home Key project that we did in partnership with Burbank Housing was 15 million plus the local housing trust fund program where we brought in additional funding. That doesn't count the tax credit applications that our nonprofit developers do and other HCD funding application from different programs that the developers pursued on their own. So in summary, looking ahead, there's more work to be done. I think staff is going to continue to, focus on those HCD programs and funding that's available to us. I think there's another exciting funding opportunity on the horizon, which is the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. That'll be, if there's questions, I can answer them. I know staff will be coming back to council with an update in time for a full discussion on that in the future. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. And so myself, Sarah Wolf, and Brian O., if you have any questions regarding any of the data or information, we'd like to answer those for you. Thank you.
And thank you for the great presentation. Obviously, we have challenges in getting our housing needs met, and appreciate your keeping track of our successes and assisting them. Councilmember Healy.
Yeah, so I'm glad to see there's some pipeline projects in addition to the ones that have been achieved, because I know some of these things have very, very long lead times. I think the PEP project was in progress for at least 10 years before it finally opened. I had a question in the staff report at the first full paragraph on page 2. There's a reference to the city's status on achieving the RHNA partway through the cycle is important for SB 35 purposes, and if we're not coming up to what we're supposed to be doing, then we're subject to SB 35 ministerial approvals. And I wanted to know, am I reading this report correctly, that because we're making the progress we are, that we're not subject to SB 35 for some period of time? And I see Mr. O standing up.
Thank you for the question. So we are currently, we must adhere to the SB 35. So there's essentially the checkpoint that we need to hit is after year 4 of this 8-year period, and we have to show 50%. So if we can get the percentages up from in the 2 low income categories up to 50% to show half of the RHNA, that is an opportunity for us to essentially come off of the SB 35 list. We have been on the SB 35 list, I believe, the 6th year of cycle 5. So we were on it during cycle 5. The state determined that we would continue to be on it at the start of cycle 6. And so the next time that we would potentially be eligible to come off that list would be doing my math, 4 plus 23, 2027.
Okay, so we have to wait a couple more years to.
Correct.
Okay, and I just wanted to mention, at the last Cal Cities board meeting, there was reference to a bill that's been introduced in the legislature, and it was characterized as extending not just SB 35 to cities that are not meeting their housing goals, but also exposing them to the builder's remedy. And I looked up the bill; it didn't quite seem to say that, but and that may have been Cal City staff talking with the author's staff. But if I hear anything more on that, I'll let folks know. Thank you.
Can I ask, is that AB 1033? Do you have a comment on 1033 coming through? It's
So in coordination with our city attorney's office, we have been tracking, or part of our regular work plan is to track potential legislation. There's a new batch of state legislation related to housing production, preservation, and protection that started in January of 2023. And so we're looking closely at making sure that we're in compliance with any new laws that came online in January, and we'll continue to monitor any future changes in state law.
Thank you, Council Vice Mayor Shribs.
Two questions, just on the last topic, the 1033, just so folks know. I think that's the ability to sell your ADU once it's built, whether it be in your backyard or in your garage. And so I know, so I just heard about it myself just last month, but apparently it just recently passed, or just close to passing at this point. And so and I think I just recently saw a letter saying, oh, we need to get ready for that from proponents of that bill, which would change our ADU production quite a bit. So are we aware of it, and are we working toward doing that here in town?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So the question is about essentially condo conversions of rental or ADUs that are currently 100% rental units. So this is an extension. The state over the last 5, 6, 7 years has really invested a lot of their attention, both financially and policymaking, to increase production of affordable housing. And so it's been a few years in. SB 9 was essentially their first attempt at essentially splitting single-family parcels, splitting them up to allow for up to 4 units on a lot. This year, the bill that you're referencing takes that a step further, would allow a property owner to essentially split it and then put it on the for sale market. Again, it's something we're tracking. I don't believe we have an application yet, but we would process that just like any other application that would be eligible as part of state law.
Thank you, because I happen to be trying to build one right now, so that's going to help me out. Anyway, the second question I have is, since I've gone to a couple of the Generation H housing seminars, and they talk quite a bit about the missing middle, and that we're doing a lot for the subsidies for the low end, and of course there's plenty of units for the high end, but the missing middle. And on your graph, the very first graph you showed, 4% of the moderate. And I was wondering, is there anything we can do, or what, if you could describe to me what a moderate unit might look like, different from the subsidized ones versus the high end market ones? What does those look like, and how can we support that particular that mid-range in there?
Thank you for the question. So the missing middle that we're talking about is really those households that don't qualify for the low or very low income, but they're at that income range that's from 81 to 120% AMI. So it's more your working families that are needing that housing. And I think that is one of the things staff was actually just having a conversation about this earlier when we were reviewing the numbers, is that over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, the state has really shifted their funding because jurisdictions were having difficulty building those low and very low income units, that a lot of the state programs fund affordable housing that's at 60% AMI and below. And so staff was taking a look at it, that we are going to see that as an area that we're going to need to be focused on, as to how do we, how can we be creative and think about projects where there's going to be funding available for what they refer to as the missing middle.
Thank you.
And missing middle is used in two differing senses, one being the sense of the income, which we're talking about, and moderate, as we talk about, is one of the state subsidized capital A affordable, but doesn't have the funding background and emphasis that are very low and low. I appreciate what staff has done to try and put the best projects together. Like on Haystack, we instead of splitting the very low and low, we put it all into one category, so we could work from that. But the other way missing middle is looked at is in product line. Instead of single family detached or high rise, there's 2 to 3 story dense compact elements, and I believe that our housing element encourages into that non-subsidized, idealized missing middle architecture style, helps our so we have incentives for architectural effort in that to be more dense, right?
Correct. So the housing element and essentially the general plan update as an extension of this concept is how do we, by definition, it's the missing middle, right? So we see the single family typically, and then we see the multifamily, Mayor, as you pointed out. So some of that is going to require an update to our zoning code, the way that we have our requirements, whether it's parking standards, setbacks. There are things that are limiting the market from producing smaller units, that the missing middle typology. And so up to this point, really the key strategy around developing a moderate missing middle income housing type has been our ADUs. So a lot of the ADUs or a lot of the units that we're counting in the past under the moderate income has just been that. It's been our production of ADUs. And so how do we expand that? So we're looking at potentially small lot, the ability to develop smaller units. So something that cities look at doing is a small lot ordinance. How do you allow for tighter setbacks? Maybe there's a relaxation on the parking standards with the idea that you're building smaller units and it's less expensive to produce. The other side, I know this question came up in the Q&A, is related to fees. And so this is something Councilman Barnacle had raised in the past. Right now, when we think about the types of fees that go into a project, it's just really clear. You get, if you are producing a single family home, you have to produce X number of impact fee. And so one of the housing element implementation strategies is to shift it away from a per unit to maybe a per square footage. So if you're building a smaller unit, your impact fee and your fees that you're paying to the city by bringing on a smaller unit would potentially be less. So these are all things we'll have to iron out as part of the general plan update, as part of the update to the zoning code, as well as looking at the development impact fee study as well.
Thank you. I had one other question. We have a fairly large apartment proposal in Rocky Dog Park area, and I'm wondering, do they have building permits? Is it in this total, or when do we anticipate them having permits?
So I don't have, I could look at our, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but I know the project that you're referring to, and so I could get back to you on where that is currently in the pipeline.
Yeah, thank you. I love these reports, but we get queried about how over we are in a category or under we are in a category, and so love getting a chance to ask the questions. And I'm not seeing any other questions from council member now.
I just mainly want to make a comment. The rents in Petaluma have become so high that the missing middle, like educators, that's elementary and secondary, they are part of the missing middle. And a home, a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom in my neighborhood goes for $3,900. We priced out our missing middle, our educators, and so they're having to commute from other areas in Sonoma County or farther just to teach in our schools. And preschool teachers are the low income. So I'm hoping that we can find something to remedy that missing middle sooner than later.
Councilmember Barnacle.
Yeah, you mentioned that we're spreading the ADUs or accounting them across multiple income levels. Are we actually going to track the occupancy or the rent prices of the ADUs, considering there's only like 25 or 30 of them that we've seen? Are we doing any follow-up to see if that's actually what we're seeing?
I think the plan is just identify the spread of the units. At this point, staff wasn't planning on doing any compliances to monitoring on those specific units. Specifically, part of it is because they're not deed restricted, so there's really no mechanism for the city to go in and ask for the.
Yeah, I'm not talking about enforcement. I'm just wondering just trying to get a sense of if the assumptions we're making are accurate, more for internal tracking than any sort of enforcement. But
I think
that's something we could do just with the council member, as you pointed out, just the volume. It would be a simple email sort of self-reporting thing that we could ask of the owner developer.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like almost always if you have something new, you're going to charge at the top of the market for it because you're trying to make your returns back. So I find the idea of like an ADU being in the very low income category, for example, not really, unless it's, renting it to a family member or something like that. It just doesn't seem like it's realistic. My second question, sort of building on, a follow-up to what the mayor asked, mine is about the riverfront townhomes. I think we approved those a while back, and I'm just wondering what the status of those are.
So I know we have about 5 river types of buildings. So riverfront is the one that is not Riverbend off Madison. So staff, if you could just cue me up.
It's by the senior apartments, Azure Senior off Hopper Street. The ones that
riverfront.
Off Caulfield.
Riverscape townhomes as part of the riverfront. It's a slight variation. My understanding is we haven't received building permits for that, but we still do have momentum and believe it'll come to fruition.
I just want to ask about housing.
Kater Thompson, please.
About housing vouchers. Would ADUs qualify if somebody wanted to do a housing voucher?
Yes, they would. The qualification is it just has to be, a living unit that has, a bathroom, a closet, and a certain amount of square footage. So yes, someone could qualify for a housing.
So if somebody's building one, do you give that information out just so they have an option or know that is an option for an owner?
We could include that. We could also, if the owner is interested, we do currently have a landlord recruitment program, so we could give them information, a landlord incentive program. So it's a great recommendation.
And, as far as like the apartments, I'll just say Deer Creek, if Will they take the housing vouchers, or has the city worked with them? Or any apartment owners for housing vouchers, the newer ones?
We recently started doing that. We started with Home First. We contracted with them to do a landlord recruitment program, and so they're actively out there talking with the landlords, letting them know what's available, what are the benefits, and kind of doing identifying the units and then matching the service providers that are working with the clients that have the vouchers together. So
do you work with apartments that are being built, or is it just single family that you work with?
I think they're talking to everybody, all kinds of different housing units, because they also recognize that the community members that need housing, it's not just one type of housing. So
right. It would be great to follow up with that, just so I can see what the city is doing and who you've reached out to.
Okay, we can get some information.
Not tomorrow.
Well, we'll get it to the city manager and she'll get the information to the full council. Thank you.
Yeah, our housing locators from our housing services groups, independent of the city, focus on getting vouchers, securing vouchers, and getting them landlord ready. So there's city programs and outside programs helping a lot of that. I'm just looking at Councilmember Pozike to see if he wants to tell us how many more housing vouchers we can pull into the. I mean, he's got his finger on the pulse down there.
I have been part of on the our county homeless coalition several voucher 1, voucher 101, voucher 201. Okay. And neither myself nor anyone on that coalition has a full understanding still of how those vouchers come about and get distributed.
Okay, so
in full,
Vice Mayor Shribs, and I think we got a little distracted. We're going to maybe try and bring it back to tonight's agenda.
You want to go first?
Call in you.
Right. Well, I'll make this pretty quick. For the middle housing, I think Riverbend might be included in that because there's some housing going there, and there was some single bedroom units that were going to be put in the back area, and they seem to have disappeared into a park area instead. Because I go by there and it looks like it's going to be all just landscape, and so I was wondering if that for that middle right there, if Riverbend is counting in this cycle. Did those units disappear off the plan somehow, or can it be counted, or what are we doing there?
We can certainly go back and take a look at the detail, but it's my understanding on that Riverbend, it's a ownership development that did include ADU units when we took a look at the data for this year.
Right, yeah, because I walked by there and I remember the plans had all these units right looking over the walkway and the river. And that's now looking like it's landscaped beautifully with native plants and benches and the like. But that whole area now looks like it's not going to be housing. So just thought I'd find out.
Good question. Councilmember Barnacle?
Yeah, I'm just looking here. It looks like, for all the hullabaloo we've heard about state, the state coming in, it feels, am I accurate to say that we've got 4 applications and 138 units that have come through ministerial review? And are there any other state laws that are greatly impacting our oversight on housing?
The primary ones at the moment, and I believe, Councilman, you're referencing the executive summary of attachment 2 that shows the applications in the pipeline. So SB 35 being one of them, as well as SB 330. So that's one other streamlining mechanism. Again, we're closely monitoring in partnership with City Attorney's Office on any future developments and new streamlining laws that may come our way.
Okay. And please make a comment.
I just wanted to make one more comment that staff will be coming back and doing an update and a presentation on our homeless services strategic plan, probably in June of this year, and so we'll make sure we include more information regarding how that case management, the housing navigators, and the housing locators work to help our clients be successful in housing.
Thank you. Let's go to public comment now, and I'd like to ask the clerk if there's any submitted online.
We did not receive any
Thank you
submitted.
very much. I'd like our moderator to read our messaging.
Thank you. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers.
Thank you very much. I see no rush to the table, nor do I have cards in-house now. And so with that, we'll close public comment on this item for the evening, bring it back to council. Councilmember Healy?
Happy to move approval.
Thank you. And Councilmember Now, is this the second on that? May we have a roll call vote?
Barnacle,
Aye.
Gator Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Fosike,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Appreciate all you're putting into. That's one of our highest goals, is housing, affordable housing in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your continued support.
And we'll move to our workshop for the evening. It's item 7, and it's the discussion of cannabis regulation options. And to
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While Ingrid Alverde, our Open Government and Economic Development Director, is coming up to join the staff team for this item, I'll get started. Good evening. I'm Eric Danley, the City Attorney. I'll be starting the presentation for this. If Ingrid, are you going to be able to share, or?
I just need about a minute or less.
Fine. Go ahead and get ready, and I will start with the some intro before we get to the slides. So this is a follow-up item from the Council Goals and Priorities workshop that we recently had in those discussions, and the cannabis regulations continued presence on the Council's top 10 priority list. And there was a memo submitted by 2 of the council members to accelerate this discussion, and we talked at the last council meeting on goals and priorities about returning with tonight's item, intended to get some high-level direction from the council that will help staff in expediting this task and also in making sure that it's tailored to the current council's direction. In the staff report tonight that accompanies this item, we talked a little bit about the interdisciplinary work that's involved on staff's part to successfully bring this before the council, regardless of the scope for which council gives us direction. But we also talk about sort of 2 main pathways that we first started discussing at the Goals and Priorities workshop, and that is whether the council favors a more expedited approach and more limited updates to the city's existing regulations to allow storefront retail cannabis on-site sales, or a more holistic update to allow those same types of sales in the city by taking a broader look and opening up more options and possibilities in terms of locations of those businesses and other financial and regulatory considerations. So tonight's presentation, we're going to look a little bit more, but still staying at a fairly high level, those options, so we can continue our work responsive to the council's direction. So thank you for getting the slides up. Ingrid, I think those are the main introductory points. So if you could, great. So, whoops, I'm sorry, could you go back just quickly and forward? There's one in between, I think. Are we missing one? I thought there was an agenda one. Well, I'll just. There we go. So that's a little bit of the introduction. We're going to provide some more background on our existing regulations. We'll talk about those two high-level options, and obviously those are not mutually exclusive. The council could direct us at a hybrid either now or later, and then hopefully we'll have council discussion, receive feedback. So now the next slide, and let's talk about our current regulations regarding cannabis. If you could go to the next one. Sounds like our slides are misbehaving a little bit, so so as Ingrid works on moving the slide, I'm sure momentarily you'll see we'll have a slide with 6 boxes. One talks about the fact that the current there it is. Thank you, Ingrid. The current regulations were adopted in 2017. They allow personal cultivation. They allow commercial testing and manufacturing. They allow delivery only, that is not on-site sale retail. They allow that for up to 2 permitted businesses. And they do it in terms of location in the city only in industrial and business park zones. I'm just going to check my list of the, we also had a summary paragraph on page 2 of the staff report to outline the existing regulations, but I think that pretty much covers what we listed for you there. Next slide, please, Ingrid. There we go. So that shows a map, which is kind of tiny, but hopefully you can see that the current regulations are pretty restrictive as to where they permit cannabis businesses, and listed for you on the slide are setbacks that are written into the regulations that prohibit those businesses from being within 600 feet of a school or child care center, or within 200 feet of a park, youth center, or library, or within 100 feet of residential districts. So that gives you a sense of the layout that results from analyzing how those current setbacks at the time those regulations were adopted applied. Going forward, we need to reanalyze potential setbacks that the council would like to either maintain or add or subtract, because there's been there's been development activity in the meantime. So if we go to the next slide, please, Ingrid. So here's the beginning of a comparison, and that we also discussed in the staff report about these sort of 2 main pathways that we see, and we talked about a little bit at the Goals and Priorities workshop, because they affect the timeline for bringing the regulations. And the sort of incremental approach will be focused on amending the city's existing regulations. It would largely maintain the current zoning in terms of the locations where the businesses are permitted, but there would still have to be zoning amendments because of the fact that the currently on-site retail sales is not a permitted use, so it would have to be made a permitted use, and that would involve updating the zoning ordinance with review by the Planning Commission and the Council, as you're aware, in terms of those procedural requirements. The reference to keeping current rules for an incremental approach refers to the administrative regulations, links to which have been included in the agenda materials. They're called commercial cannabis regulations. Those 2 would need to be amended to permit on-site retail sales, but that's a pretty surgical change. The council is following that incremental approach or a version of it, and that incremental approach, as described by staff here, would allow up to 3 permits. Currently, the city's regulations allow up to 2, but again, the council is directing us to all these things, so that's just what's sketched out there. A more comprehensive approach. Some differences are it's really more of a wholesale substitution of the city's existing regulations with more extensive ones. I would remind you, though, those that were paying attention to this issue when these regulations were adopted. Remember, we still have medical cannabis regulations, and some of those likely would need to be retained, but a more comprehensive approach wouldn't merely involve amending the existing regulations. It would most likely involve replacing most of them. We would anticipate, although the council's direction may not involve this, but we would anticipate from a more sweeping and holistic revisiting of the regulations, additional financial analysis, potentially regarding tax or fee revenue from cannabis businesses, and also the costs of a more extensive program, and the sort of top and the bottom bullets on the slide under the comprehensive approach, stakeholder outreach, and discussion of expanded locations are really the biggest piece, I think, or pieces that distinguish what's involved in the incremental approach versus the comprehensive one, because, and they're closely interrelated, because a more wholesale revisiting of where cannabis commercial activity could include in the city, by definition, allows a much more, just a more extensive consideration before the Planning Commission with community members and stakeholders, considerations of things like, what's appropriate for downtown, what's appropriate for setbacks. Right now, the setbacks are fashioned based on limited potential sites for commercial cannabis, and additional considerations may be desired by the council if we look at a broader part of the city. And going along with those more extensive revisiting of where commercial cannabis activity could be permitted in the city, is we would anticipate more extensive stakeholder and community outreach and discussion and workshops. So let me see if I left anything out. So and I think those are the main features we identified comparing those two paths in the staff reports. And we also noted, and this is on page 3 of what was a pretty short staff report, some things that we see sort of being inherently at issue in these updated cannabis regulations for the city include, whichever path the council chooses, or whichever hybrid version, how many on-site cannabis retail locations and businesses should be permitted in the city, where, and an important procedural question, and also in terms of issues like potential litigation liability of the city and enforcement, should on-site retail sales be permitted by right or subject to a conditional use permit that would be approved by the Planning Commission. So I think we're ready for the next slide, please, Ingrid. And this is very rough, and it depends on a little bit on the details of the direction we get from the council. We are confident that with an incremental approach, we could be back with the council, to the council for with regulations for consideration and action in June of this year. Comprehensive option, mostly because of the outreach and the sort of the planning and land use considerations, we could see taking up to in 2025. But again, that sort of depends on the direction we get, and given the council's focus on this priority, there's no staff desire to slow walk this. And I'll remind the council, as I mentioned, and the Goals and Priorities Workshop, and also, as we mentioned in the staff report, we do have a lot of background work that we've been doing, actually based on feedback from the prior council, involving looking to Santa Rosa as a model for more comprehensive update to the city's regulations. So we have lots we can draw from there. But in any case, as we've seen with some of our major legislative projects, the more extensive they are, the more public input necessarily is involved, and there's a time factor to that. So There would also be, I want to mention, and we talk about in the staff report, there are basically three components that are involved. Again, whichever path, more extensive or more focused. The regulations are not all of one type, and they all need to work together. So there are land use regulations, that's in the zoning ordinance. There's health and safety regulations, those are under the city's police power and the municipal code. And there are administrative regulations, and we have each of those in place as part of, as making up our cannabis regulations now, and going forward, we would continue to have, and that's why there's a little bit of coordination and a role for the Planning Commission. And Ingrid is here and to help answer questions, especially with respect to our existing program, our existing regulations, the means by which, the process by which, to date, cannabis commercial businesses have been permitted and permits have been reviewed, and they've been approved for permit because she's been overseeing that program, and particularly if the council is directing a more incremental approach, we would be focused on updating those same regulations, and Ingrid is going to be very able to address how that's gone and how we see that going forward. So Ingrid, I don't know if you have additional things you'd like to add, but now will be a good time before we open it up for questions by the council and then by the public.
Thank you. I actually just wanted to add one thing. The timing on the comprehensive option was also in consideration of the zoning code update that we are going to be working on with the general plan. And the thinking was, if we were going to be doing major amendments to the zoning ordinance, why not do it at the same time as when we're doing our general plan in 2025?
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Can we start with Councilmember Healy?
Yeah, I'm glad to have the slide still up on the screen. That kind of sets it out as we have to choose option A or option B, and I'm wondering if there's a hybrid or a blended approach that could be talked about here, where we said, okay, we'll do incremental for one or two permits, and then following Ms. Alverde's comments, pair up option two with the zoning amendments coming out of the general plan, and have one or two more permits available at that time.
Absolutely. One thing I should have mentioned, kind of in terms of the history of the council's cannabis regulations, and you will recall this, Councilmember Healy, I think best of all perhaps, is there was a conscious effort on the part of the council. If you think back to it was quite a complex landscape when local governments were regulating about cannabis, especially medical cannabis, but then when it became also non-medical cannabis and the state regulations were in disarray and the federal government approach and tolerance for permitting cannabis was also in disarray, there was a desire on the part of the council to be cautious and to be consistent with, and it's right in the findings in our code, to be consistent with the voters' direction to permit non-medical cannabis, but to do so with an eye to also preserving public safety. And so I think it's fair to say, I think our staff would say, I think police department and others would say that we've been successful with that approach in terms of not having some of the negative effects from commercial cannabis activity in Petaluma, but it's also been very limited activity. So it is certainly true, and that's why I made some reference to hybrids, that this is just kind of a typology that we came up with the council to try to get some early direction to help us be efficient. But one option with what we're calling the incremental approach is it could be a start like the council's prior regulations were, and really a follow-up to those that may not at all be the end point, but could be expanded either as part of the general plan discussion or otherwise to look at other changes that the council may wish to do. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Cater Thompson, any question here tonight?
Oh, well, I just wanted to
Comment?
comment that when I was on the general plan committee, that was one of the discussions was medical marijuana and bringing that through. So we could actually have, if we did, say the basics today, it wouldn't be until almost 2026 before we would do an update, because the general plan, when is that coming before us?
It's on track to be considered for adoption before the end of 25. So this still tracks with it.
So the end of 2025. Okay. Something to think about.
Vice Mayor Shribs?
Just a couple of questions on the effort and timing of these two options. Of course, I personally would favor doing both. Start with one, get something done. It's always good, as they say, do something good to start with, and don't delay if you can. But comparing these two, compare and contrast, you mentioned public outreach and the effort, both the legal effort as well as the zoning and other processes that might be in place. Can you give us the amount of effort, do a comparison of the amount of effort? Are we talking about, it's 10% of the effort to do the incremental and get that done quickly compared to the 10 times the amount of work to get to the comprehensive, as far as volume of work by staff, and also working with the community and trying to get something through? How easy would it be to get through the incremental? How many public meetings would we have to hold? And how many different laws or regulations would we have to start changing compared to the second one? Can you give us a level?
So I think I can give some helpful response to that. Not in such a quantitative way. I know with your science background you prefer quantitative answers, but it is the increment. What we've described as the incremental option, which is doing surgical amendments to our existing regulations, in some way sort of tracking to what we've suggested, is a much easier legislative exercise, first of all. So that's a pretty big time savings for us, even though, as I mentioned, we've got working drafts that are more extensive regulations. The big factor, I think, is the community outreach part, and it's not so much the same as crunching through regulations or doing legal research. It's just the time that's involved and the teamwork that's involved in getting the workshops together, getting the materials ready for them, advertising them, staffing those. And remember, if we're doing, when we're doing zoning amendments, the Planning Commission is involved, so there's outreach at the Planning Commission level, and then there's outreach at the council level. So, and it really depends on, what it's really determined by the council direction. But I would anticipate that the broader is the look that the council wants to take, or the broader possibilities the council is considering for reimagining where cannabis commercial activity occurs in the city, the more people are going to want to engage with that, the more stakeholders are going to want to engage. So to me, the time factors are the drafting and the research is really simplified by the amendment approach. The outreach and Ingrid can speak this much better than I, because she runs our outreach and that public coordination process. There's a lot involved, and people don't necessarily realize it because they do it so smoothly. Our team does. And so that's a big time factor. And I would say those are, the other one is pipeline. So, and I'm always terrible about remembering this, and Peggy gets on me, and thankfully she does. When we have a more discreetly focused project, there's less interference with other projects. I know that sounds weird, but that really helps us get it done. Whereas when we've got a longer period of time and we've got a timetable for workshops and stuff, more is happening. So I think those are the reasons why. And maybe Ingrid may have a better idea about how we could try to quantify that, but that's what I would say are the big differences. And it's not, I want to be clear. My colleague Dylan Brady, who was here earlier tonight, has been working away on very extensive drafts for a more extensive program if that's going to be the council's direction, and we'll be able to pull from that whatever we do, and we can revisit that if the council wants, as Council Member Healy suggested you might, to start incrementally and move more broadly. So those are going to be helpful either way, and I'm not trying to, push this off or slow walk it, but those are some of the reasons why we can get some efficiency benefits by this approach that the city manager talked about, goals and priorities, and we're talking about tonight.
Good. And maybe for other staff to, in addition to a little tweak on that, would be if we can get the incremental done quickly, soon, with minimum effort. Once we get that done and get 2 or 3, whatever the number is, accomplished and retail started, I would think that would be really advantageous for the next step to be a more comprehensive approach that would actually make that much faster and easier once we have the first one done and shown some experience with it. So would that be a true statement, do you think?
Vice Mayor, 100% accurate. I mean, we're essentially building off of proof of concept, which is the delivery-only model, which has proven to be successful. There isn't a essentially queue that is showing that we're essentially limiting the market. And so what we're basically doing is saying this is a model that has worked. We have a lot of work that we have done to get to this point, and the map I wanted to just pull up, this is essentially our scope. So there's a lot of work that got done to identify business parks and industrial zoned areas. And so if we were to just build off of that existing, that's what we're presenting as incremental. Just for example, as part of maybe a larger, more comprehensive discussion with the community and with merchants, the topic of empty storefronts in downtown has come up in many avenues. If we were to, as part of a comprehensive look at cannabis retail, I would think looking at the parcels currently zoned commercial would be that much more comprehensive, in depth, and it's going to cover way more parcels than you're seeing here. The other one is mixed use, so that's another zoning designation that we use, a permitted use for general retail. One thing that we would need to, that may be complicated there, that again we need to talk through in outreach is saturation. So if we have mixed use that's along all of our corridors, our large corridors throughout the city, there's a question about saturation, there's a question about proximity to residential, a question about proximity to our schools that are all throughout the city. So again, a lot more discussion with the community and a lot more studying that we would have to do to look at this policy more comprehensively.
The other thing that you're not seeing here, and why this was sort of a clean approach, is that many of our business parks have specific zoning planned unit developments. So that was a whole nother, there's, a dozen or so that if we wanted to consider allowing cannabis uses in the business parks beyond industrial and business park, we could potentially be opening up 10 to 12 planned unit developments, as well as, again, those mixed use zones, which cover a pretty broad area. So I do think 10 to 1, I think that's a fair comparison. I know for Eric that was scientific, but my gut says sort of a 10 to 1 effort. From incremental to comprehensive.
That's really the feeling I get, and I'm suspecting that if we do the quick and dirty first, that actually that will make quicker getting to the goal, the end goal, which is real cannabis stores in real locations that are needed and wanted, faster and easier if we actually do.
Yeah, and I think it can be done in parallel because you just start opening up a lot of these broader conversations. So in parallel, you're looking at not only how we issue the permits, what kind of operators we're looking for, and how we're selecting them. And again, which zones do we want to consider? How broad do we want to go? I'm sure we'll hear from a lot of property owners, both pro and con, about different zones and different opportunities. with the buffers, et cetera. So the incremental would be very surgical because we already did this kind of very limited approach where we would allow retail, where we allow delivery-only retail now, but in the same zones and in the same way that we did this in the past.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get clarity on that.
Yeah, I think I want to ask for a few. I mean, there's a lot of we might, and I would prefer to ask a couple of yes or no type questions. One, if we do the incremental, and I'm kind of only interested in the incremental, except as per hybrid at a later date. But if we add one retail in one area that's already marked, do we do public process on this? Is there hearings? Does it go to does it go to planning ever again? Or incrementally, can we just open one and have? I mean, you say a June date here, but that means no public process between now and June. I mean, that allows for none. So, will one new retail keep us on June?
Well, the incremental doesn't mean no public process, and either way, we still need to go before the Planning Commission. So that would have to happen.
You think
because
we can
we're
get
talking
back to council in June with that limited of a?
Yeah.
Yes, and we'll have a public process as far as applications and what that looks like.
And will the public applications occur before the June date? No, I mean, the ordinance occurs in June, so then we have the application dates. And so 1 or 3 retails could fit in the incremental and keep us on target in June.
Correct. And we would also be talking about what the process looks like, so everybody.
And would the
we can manage
process for
everybody's
retail look
expectations.
exactly like the process for delivery? I mean, minor tweaking?
It wouldn't look exactly, but it would look. The point of the incremental approach is to be efficient, so we'd be just updating those things that need to be to accommodate the on-site retail sales. But that still is, there's a land use component to that, so it does have to go before the Planning Commission, and these are ordinances, so first reading, second reading, 30 days. But, and there, as I mentioned also during the slides, the administrative regulations would need to be updated, but that too would be surgical because they're pretty comprehensive as they are, and they've worked well in practice. So it would really be tweaks to what we have.
And if we made any change out of the existing zones, that we'd lose the June date?
I don't know about any, but those are the changes that have the greatest potential to add time and more community conversations that are needed.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to get those two on the table as to what the June expectation was. Councilmember Posake?
Sorry, I had a question about the selecting. Let's just say we're only going to do one. And are there any legal constraints at all in the criteria we use to select?
Sure, there are. And if you look at the existing regulations, we're very mindful of those to make sure that we're clear that they're not ministerial permits, they're discretionary permits. No one has an entitlement to them. I think probably people are aware in the news there's recently been litigation brought in Healdsburg regarding their award process for cannabis businesses. We'd want to continue to avoid that in our regulations. So they need to be, lawful selection processes. They need to be fair, non-discriminatory. We need to follow our own rules. Otherwise, we might be vulnerable to challenge on that basis. They need to be tailored to achieve the results we want. But another benefit of the incremental approach in terms of time, in terms of the time factor, is that we get to use pretty much the process we have, adjusting it just to allow storefront on-site retail sales.
Okay, and in that same regard, one other question, and I don't, know how I got there, but in my research on this subject, I got to the I believe it's the California Public Health Institute, which recommended, selecting nonprofit organizations to. I didn't make an exhaustive search, but I couldn't find a nonprofit that was doing retail marijuana sales in the county, but I only looked at a few. Is there any?
Not that I'm
Anybody
aware
know?
of.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question, and I think when we put together the initial process, the factors that we were looking at was we were looking for teams that had experience in the business, that had a strong community reputation, had a solid business plan, that was really focused on serving the Petaluma community, and I think that is how we selected the current cannabis business that's in town. And it helped weed out some others that I think might not have been as successful. And I think if we were to follow that same process, I think a nonprofit would be very competitive if there were one that were interested in serving Petaluma and could meet, the locational requirements that would be in place under the incremental. But I think that would be very competitive with the process we've looked at in the past. If it's a nonprofit with the goal of serving the community, some businesses, the goal is just to maximize profit, focus on tourism, think about how to bring as many people in to buy cannabis versus truly serving our community, being community partners, being part of our chamber and being part of our little leagues, and really being that kind of business that Petaluma wants to have. So I think that selection process would seek that out.
Okay, and one last comment. In terms of the mayor's comment about having to do, and I mean, the only way it seems to me to not have a lot of, be responsive with public outreach is doing one unit is to put it out further from the downtown than any of the red spots on this map.
Well, we have one further from our town. We need one in the town. Councilmember now.
Thank you. To clarify, in the staff report, staff has it as limited option in the tonight's presentation. It's called incremental. Is that the same?
It is.
Okay, thank you to clarify that. And this is a great beginning, and I'm all for the limited or incremental. And as we move to the comprehensive, this map that shows these red zones, the only one on the west side that I'm seeing is right near the fairgrounds. So this map has to be reviewed, and now we have more housing that's gone into Deer Creek with the mixed use. So we have to redo this cannabis business map and maybe look at some commercial areas away from downtown, but on the west side. And I'm seeing everything is near like Lakeville or the freeway, and there's a lot of potential over on the west side, where there's
That's
been
really
some change of
related.
ownership of some parcels.
Yeah, and that is related to the fact that the current regulations limit to industrial and business park zones, and there are very few, if any, industrially zoned parcels or business park parcels on the west side, and the few that there are most likely, in this analysis, hindered by those buffers. One of the things we would have to do, even in this case, is we just have to kind of do a new analysis of where buffers might be now. Where we actually did pull data for those uses and pulled out parcels that wouldn't meet the buffering requirements.
Because on the edge of town, there is no parks, there's no schools, there's no residential. It's
right,
got
and that's the nature of
traffic
industrial
flow.
zoning. Right, that's the goal of industrial zoning and
But
business
it's a
park zoning is
commercial-
to have those things more separate. And so that was the vision at the time. And one thing I was saying is we do have a lot of business parks that aren't industrial or business park zone because they have the planned unit development. So that would be a whole nother analysis I would recommend that we do, is looking at whether or not we want to open those or not open those. Or again, we'd have to really take the temperature of the community and think through where we'd really want these businesses, and then think surgically about zoning. Because, Brian was saying mixed use zone, we have a lot of mixed use zone properties, and as how far, how wide, how many, what kind of concentration, what kind of selection process would be just a bigger discussion.
The effort you're describing is the comprehensive option.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
So incremental,
So-
we would stick to this map or whatever the map would look like if we reran the buffers, but stayed within the industrial and business park zones. And then a more comprehensive look could start to open up the zoning. Do we want to look at additional business parks? Do we want to look at mixed use or commercial zones? And then we would probably run some scenarios of like, if we opened up this zone, how far and wide would that look? And then if we opened up another zone, we could look at some maps and start. What I find is when you start looking at maps and you start lighting up different zones, you start having different feelings about how that feels in your community, and we'd have to kind of work with the community to think through. How
Okay,
many, how
we
far.
hear you on that.
Okay.
Councilmember Cater Thompson?
With the zoning, if you did the incremental versus the comprehensive, and bringing shopping centers into it, we have quite a few shopping centers. We have one right in downtown, but it's just outside of, Kentucky Street area. So how difficult would that be to bring into this map? What's the time frame?
So what we're presenting here is what we are proposing is achievable within a shorter time frame. So June of this year, using the existing information and the data that got us to this map. Councilmember, what you're asking about is essentially expanding it to potentially some of our neighborhood commercially zoned, so the larger shopping centers. That's something that we're recommending will require a little more analysis, and so that's something we would think would take us into the end of next year. As part of this workshop, however, if there is, happy to entertain any specific additional land use designations that we should be prioritizing. And so, for example, the neighborhood commercial, regional, there's a few ways we could look at this. It sounds like a starting point would be some of our existing shopping centers that we have throughout, primarily on the east side of town, but we're, the larger ones, Deer Creek, East Washington Plaza, Golden Eagle. I think those are the ones you're referencing.
And when it says it has to be 100 feet from, 600 from schools, 200 from parks, so is that from where the location in the center, or is it where the center begins?
Property
Is
line
it
to
the
property line.
Okay. Yeah, because I think we're missing a real opportunity to have one in the west side of town. And that's really unfortunate when the mapping was done. I'm not really sure why the mapping was done the way it was. I wasn't watching that at that time. But I think that's it's unfortunate, but I don't want to take this into end of 2025. So I guess the incremental might be the option. The only option.
Thank you. And Councilmember Barnacle?
Sometimes in Petaluma, I feel like we're really leading on things. Past gas station ban, and then this topic comes up, and I feel like I live in rural Alabama, and this is Ronald Reagan's America. And it is embarrassing, like how much we are pouring over this stuff. We undertook the most significant and important public outreach process in our city for the fairgrounds. We did it in 6 months. The city goals and priorities website that I'm looking at shows that we're going to have this in April to June of 2023. We would be reviewing an ordinance for adoption. Now things come up, but the idea that in January of 2022, we set this as a priority, and we're going to see it in late 2025. 4 years later tells me it's not a priority. Meanwhile, we've got businesses closing and empty storefronts is a growing priority. We say we want 15-minute neighborhoods. One of the most common things that people go to 15-minute neighborhoods for, go to Fair West. What do you think they make all their money on? Selling alcohol, selling beer. I know. I go there, I grab a 6-pack of beer, and I enjoy it with my friends and watch a basketball game. The idea that you should have to drive 15 minutes to get a couple of joints doesn't really pan out when we think about the city of a 15-minute neighborhood. It's just, there's so much that, and like all the fears that we're talking about here are just feeding a propaganda. And so if we're going to really have to wait until January of 2025, I'd propose that we just put it on the ballot in November of 2024 and let the voters decide, because we're not representing the people of Petaluma right now. We're not at all representing the people of Petaluma. So I'm happy with the incremental approach, but I think we can do both things. We should start outreach right now for the rest of it. Bring forward something in January of 2025, December of 2024, something like that. You know, make it happen. It's unacceptable because the first general plan timeline that we saw said that it was going to be like a 2.5-year process, and now it's going to be a 5-year process, and things get pushed out. So if we're waiting for the zoning code update to come, what are we waiting for, 2027? You know, like our current zoning code never got really finished. Like I'm convinced that we're going to finish our zoning code this time, but like I certainly am not going to time this with the zoning code update. That's another delay tactic, and we've seen like this has absolutely been delayed over and over again, and it's not serving the community. I mean, I don't think our existing ordinance has been successful at anything except for pushing businesses out just outside of our city limits. Like, let's get with the times here, people. Like, so yeah, let's do the incremental thing and do it quickly, and also we can do something else too. This option A or option B is, you know, it's a false. These are false alternatives. There's a hybrid model in here that was optioned, and I'd say that bring forward, do the outreach and bring forward a comprehensive plan. Put a survey out there and ask questions. Put it on the ballot, for crying out loud, and let the people decide. You know, like it's maddening to think that we're just continuing to drag this out and delay it, and that this is a city goal or a city council priority from January of 2022, and we still have no like specific timeline for delivering it. So I appreciate the creativity of opening it up for our existing operators so that they can at least compete in the market and not, you know, like we don't keep disadvantaging them. I also want to see a real ordinance that's not checking the box. Like that's just, you know, that's a stopgap measure so that we help businesses not close.
So I appreciate all the input and comments, questions, and I think when we come back from public comment, I'll kind of poll around to see what resonates with the council variously and collectively. So let's move this over to public comment for right now, and I'll ask our city clerk if we've received any public comment.
Yes, we received 2 comments and they're on the website.
Wonderful. And I'd like to ask our moderator to read our messaging for getting your cards and letters in, getting your speaker card for the evening in.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the public attending in person should bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if they have not already done so. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. Please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers.
Okay, thank you very much. And I assume everybody has had a chance to get their card in, and anybody who wishes to get their card in is striding purposefully towards the clerk's desk to achieve that. And so let's start with Claire Firestone, to be followed by Jamat Klesk. How's that?
James Clark, receiving my time.
James Clark? Got it. Okay, thank you. And so we concede time on an agenda item like this, and so let's please set, and the time's at 3 minutes, so this will be a 6 if necessary.
I'll start with 3 and then I'll just do it again at up to 6.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and City staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Claire Firestone. I'm a longtime Petaluma resident, a mother, a Chamber of Commerce board member, and I am one of the owners and founders of Farmhouse Artisan Market, Petaluma's pioneering cannabis delivery service since 2018, and currently the only cannabis business permitted by the city of Petaluma. Today, I stand before you to express our strong support for the incremental option regarding the future of cannabis retail in our city. The incremental option presents a clear, immediate path to enhancing Petaluma's economic and social fabric. By allowing a maximum of 3 storefront operators, the approach not only streamlines the update to our existing ordinance, but also ensures that the city can swiftly benefit from significant tax revenues, well over $100,000 a year, that are crucial for our community's development and well-being. As the first cannabis retailer in Petaluma operating exclusively in the delivery model, we are ready to transition to a storefront with delivery model. Our goal is to establish our very first physical location. This is not an expansion for us, but a long-awaited next step. Unlike potential competitors who may be seeking to open their second, third, fourth, or even fifth location, our focus is on laying down our first foundational brick in Petaluma. This distinction is crucial as it underscores our commitment to starting right here in our community where our heart lies. Farmhouse has been part of Petaluma's fabric for over 5 years, and we've been eagerly waiting for the opportunity to provide a tangible and, for some, more accessible service to our loyal customers. Our track record with the Petaluma Police Department speaks volumes of our commitment to safety and compliance, further supported by our local customer base that has consistently advocated for our expansion into storefronts since our inception. This unwavering support underscores the community's trust in us and highlights the potential for a successful, sustainable cannabis ecosystem within city limits. Moreover, we have identified a suitable location within the current commercial cannabis overlay, demonstrating our readiness and commitment to this transition. Moving forward with the, what were we calling it? The incremental option allows us to immediately bring these plans to fruition, benefiting both the city and its residents. Choosing the incremental option also offers a unique opportunity to gauge and shape a sustainable cannabis ecosystem in Petaluma. We do not want to have the oversaturation that other areas see with storefronts struggling. Thriving storefronts promotes higher product turnover, ensuring freshness and variety for customers. This, in turn, encourages our residents to shop locally, retaining sales and tax revenue within our community. In conclusion, the incremental option aligns with Petaluma's immediate interests and long-term goals. It offers a pragmatic, timely solution that leverages existing momentum, supports local business, and responds to community demand. We urge the Council to consider the tangible benefits of this option and look forward to continuing to contribute to Petaluma's vibrant, thriving future. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Blake Hooper, to be followed by Jamie Reagan.
Thank you very much. First, I just want to say that Councilmember Barnacle took the words right out of my mouth on most of this. And just to drill down more specifically, if we don't talk about changing where we're zoning and allowing storefronts for this, this will be an utterly useless ordinance. Right now in Planning Commission, we are struggling to make mixed use work because commercial storefronts keep proving to be an untenable option. This represents a major change that could help the city revitalize major storefronts and major corridors in our city, help bring back the sales tax revenue we need to expand staffing, and then in turn help get us more resources. And to quote the mayor again from, I think, 2 meetings ago, staff is our #1 resource and superpower when it comes to getting anything done in this city. This could represent a major change for helping us expand our resources. Also, to just drill down in terms of the options, please look at parallel. Go for the incremental option as quickly as you can, but also if it's realistic that staff can then start planning for the future, start doing that now. Again, to Councilmember Barnacle's point, we need to start doing the public outreach and engaging it in every single aspect of what we're doing with the general plan and the IZO. which we're doing a lot of outreach right now. There's no reason all of this can't parallel and overlap with what we're already doing. Doing this also allows us to be a little bit more realistic. We've got the general plan coming up, the IZO. I'm sure we'll have design standards to follow that. We've got a climate mitigation plan. We also have a carbon blueprint that we have to implement as well. All of this is going to take time, and I suspect more time than's already been scheduled just based on everything else that we've seen and how realistic it is for us to move forward. So if we're moving in parallel, it at least gives us more time than 2025 to have a real comprehensive discussion. And if we're not going to have as much public engagement in the incremental approach, we can make up for it with the longer term option as we're going for a more comprehensive policy. And finally, I do want to flag a slight issue with the June timeline for this coming for Planning Commission. As you can imagine, I talked a great deal with Andrew about our upcoming meetings. We just got a doozy of an update today about our general plan updates that are coming up, as well as the ad hocs we'll probably have to create to make all of that happen on the timeline that's been given to us. I don't really see how we are able to cram this in by June, but if we can do it, we should do it. Just know we're going to have to make choices. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, it's not by June, it's in June, just FYI. So we will get it done in June.
Jamie Regan, to be followed by John Hanania.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jamie. I own Down Under Industries, which is on the outskirts of Petaluma here. I've been operating since 2018, and I think it would, while I'd like to see you move forward with the incremental approach to allow for a dispensary in town immediately, I think it would be a mistake to limit it to only industrial zoning. Seeing as our location is on the outskirts and cannabis has sort of been this like taboo, hidden away, entity. You want to be somewhere where people have access to be able to get medicine and get their products without having to drive far to do that. And so, we would like to see you. I'm glad that we're talking about it. It's becoming, part of the discussion where we're actually making efforts to do that. And I secondly would like to see it be really considered, local operators and people that have a real interest in the community here, rather than opening it up to corporations. I think that she also mentioned that I think that would be a mistake, for Petaluma to allow for large corporate, takeover of this industry. And then additionally to that, I think it would be imperative to think about how many operators you allow, because Santa Rosa, I heard someone mention that earlier as a model, I think made a big mistake with allowing so many operators. And I look at how those dispensaries are suffering with an overly competitive market. And I think that's something to take a look at in terms of what locations these dispensaries are allowed. But I definitely think that retail and accessibility with parking and walking scores are important. And of course, our West Side community needs something too. So thank you.
Thank you. John Hanania.
Good evening. When you last brought this up, I think it was about a year ago, and the biggest thing I ask about, and I'll ask again, what are you doing in terms of safety? The crime that comes with marijuana and cannabis, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm not saying don't do it. I just want to know, what is it that you're doing? Are you going to increase police? Because there's a lot of crime. And Barnacle, last year, he didn't like what I had to say, and he went on to say, well, look how many DUI we have. Alcohol is legal. Well, alcohol is legal. So does guns. And guns been legal for 234 years. But look at all the crime that comes with it. So, and then I hear you talk about putting things on the ballot. Well, and you talk about, how you're not representing the community. Well, there's so many things you're not representing the community with. So when you say things, it bothers me. Because it seems like when you are passionate about something, You are all gung-ho about it, but when the community is passionate about something else, it falls on a deaf ear. So I will say it again. What are you willing to do when it comes to safety? And I never got an answer. And I will say it loud and clear. I'm not against it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's our last speaker, and it closes public comment. I think I bring it back to council. There's probably a few more questions and comments and things. Before we get rolling, I'd like to ask myself, so the ordinances require an annual re-up reviewed by the police chief, and I'd like a comment on how that process has worked. Have we experience with the re-up, and is it rigorous enough in the ordinance as currently, and is the police department or staff suggesting that any strengthening of that is appropriate this time with the proposed change to retail?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ingrid and Chief, are you comfortable addressing that? I think they're the best ones to help answer, and if I can help, I certainly will.
I think what I would say in terms of safety, our current program, we have not had any issues. Chief, if you want to step in, we've renewed that permit several times.
Yeah, that's completely accurate. We have had no issues with the current business who sought multiple renewals. We've had no complaints or concerns with their model, and the permitting process for them, and based on those considerations, has been relatively streamlined.
I think what we don't know is how things would or wouldn't change if we change the model from delivery only to retail. So this would be that pilot opportunity to kind of live within our existing parameters, open up retail to see if there is any change to crime, which may or may not occur. We would know when we had that experience.
In our past 2 years' efforts out at cannabis, making it a priority over the last couple of years, have we viewed or assessed what other agencies are going through and have resources to deal with what our neighbors have taught us? Are we in a good place for this?
To Ingrid's point, I think there's a lot of unknown variables there. I mean, from a public safety perspective, we are actively monitoring what other jurisdictions are experiencing. We do see some elements of crime and criminal activity associated. I don't know that it's necessarily relative to the business model, but there are crimes that are occurring at these establishments, or sometimes these establishments are the victim of crimes, and we could see that with any type of business. So again, our goal in public safety is to be responsive and monitor developments and be prepared and ensure and report back any staffing or resourcing needs that may be necessary to ensure that we can conduct enforcement consistent with whatever our ordinance is.
Okay, thanks. Let's bring it back for any questions from council. Vice Mayor Shribs.
One thing I've heard in I have a couple different conversations with different people is the number of people, the city of town versus the number of stores that might be the most appropriate. And well, one of the ratios I've heard is for every 20,000 people, one store would be viable. We have 60,000 people, 3 stores. Is that correct information I've gotten, or do we have different information than that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's a good research point that we would want to look into.
Councilmember Healy.
So, thank you. I just wanted to ask, probably Ms. Alverde, would there be any synergies to having the comprehensive piece connected with general plan and zoning code update, or I'm just trying to figure out how this would work. Would you have a whole series of conversations with the community about all the proposed changes to the zoning code, and this would just be one set of those, or would this? You got the gist.
If it's okay, I can jump in there. Yes, there's absolute synergy. This question has come up, not specific to cannabis, but just how retail has changed with e-commerce, and so the way that our community is interacting with and receiving their services is not the typical brick and mortar. And so again, yes to synergy. There's other topics that have come up related to food trucks and just different types of uses that would lend and be much more comprehensive as part of the zoning code discussion.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I know some members of the council are frustrated that this hasn't moved forward more quickly. I'm personally at least as frustrated that the general plan hasn't moved forward as quickly. So I don't want to do anything that's going to, push that time frame back either. So I'm glad to hear that there would be some compatibility with doing this as part of the comprehensive piece as part of the general plan and zoning code update.
Councilmember Posake.
Yes, I just want to voice my support for a quick plan followed by a more extensive plan. And I'd like to see us push the boundaries of what the quick plan can be. And one other thing I'd like to see in choices offered to us is whether we can do anything with any social equity considerations in the quick plan.
Okay. Councilmember Now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to go to our local dispensary. I went to the delivery service and view there, and also our local Down Under. And not a consumer. And 20 years ago, when I sat on the council, I had children that were in high school and college, and I was adamant against it. So to Barnacle, no one can buy any kind of cannabis in Marin County, but Sonoma County and Petaluma is doing really well with having a delivery service. So I'm pretty proud because now I have friends who have medical needs and a lot of friends who are older who have cancer and they need this. So this cannabis. So I see it as almost like a drugstore, and drugstores, when the CVS pharmacy shuts down, there's a metal door that comes down and no one can get past that. At these dispensaries, there are layers and layers of security. I had to show my ID. I had to sign in. I was not a consumer, so I had to wear a special badge. And I saw the layers of security. And we probably have better security at these dispensaries than we do at the liquor stores. And my local grocery store has baby formula locked down. How sad is that? I mean, I was like checking out at the grocery store and baby formula is and pseudoephedrine, it has to be under a padlock. So we have more security at these dispensaries than we do at our local CVS and liquor stores. And I'm pretty proud of Sonoma County for even having gone the next step. And Petaluma I'm all for this limited or incremental and getting something moving forward faster for our community. I know a lot of people who are suffering and they need the cannabis for medical reasons. It's not just a recreational use anymore and the taboo that went with it. So thank you for coming tonight and making public comments. I really applaud your business models. Thank you.
I know I personally will vote for anything that is in the incremental basket, partially because of the need to open up retail, as we've talked about for years, but partially because I am concerned that we don't have the bandwidth to invest in the long-range efforts that we need to. So many of our goals that we discuss all run through the public hearing process, the ordinance writing process, the conforming process, and it seems that's where the constraints are in achievement. Is getting the public on the same page with an ordinance that protects them at the same time. So incremental for me is absolutely the way to go. There's a few questions about what that means. Does it mean only in the prescribed zones? If it takes longer than the June 24, I'd probably vote against any increased areas. But obviously, long term, that's not the answer. Long term, we need a different thing. But we'll still have a goals session coming up, but we'll have achieved the incremental. So I think the incremental is absolutely the way to go immediately. And I think when I say incremental, it means changing nothing from the existing ordinance except adding retail. Well, then the question I will poll here is how many retail is the same, is the number we want in town, which I appreciate the 20,000 number. And then the question is do we allow existing businesses, call them legacy businesses, to have leg up, or do we say our process is our process and everybody just applies for our process? And good past performance is one of the indicators for whether you get the next license or not, but without specifically saying somebody doing business now. And I think a lot of our existing process hits all the right questions we want to ask for vendors. So with that, I'd like folks to weigh in perhaps on issues segmentally, which is, let me start with what's the right number to go. I mean, I'll make an assumption that we like the idea of a retail ordinance, and so if you don't, then just say I don't have an answer for the question you're asking me. But the first question I'd like to ask is, well, how many retail outlets do you expect in this town? And I'll start with Councilmember Healy.
Yeah, I'm not really ready to have that conversation yet. I don't think we're ready for it. 1 per 20,000 is what our existing ordinances allow for card rooms, and we actually have 0 at this time. But there was testimony, there was comments about Santa Rosa having too many, and it's not healthy. I have no idea how many Santa Rosa has. I know Vallejo has gone through issues, but let's just make that a parking lot issue, and to come back in June with the quick fix, and because I'm not in a position to make an informed decision on that.
Okay, that's thanks for weighing in first on that. Do we have someone else who'd like to weigh in on the right quantity in town? Vice Mayor?
I think I would go like the card room is at 20,000 per, a maximum of 3, I would say. And looking at locations, we want to have locations that are at least spread out around town. So it's like,
let's,
it's not 20 or 15.
I have a location question
locations.
as well.
But I'm looking at 3 that are one in each of the separate locations, so that there's.
So you can answer. You're answering both questions now. I'll pass on you on the location then.
Sure.
So, Councilmember Cater Thompson, do you want to answer 1 or 2 questions? How many? And we just added location. If you want to answer that at the same time.
Okay, I'll go with 3, but I think we could have 4. In locations, it still bothers me that there is not locations on the west side, and that's a problem.
I guess what I'll do is ask follow-up questions. So if the west side means not having incremental, do you still want a west side? Or you say?
I'll go with the plan because I see where we're going, but I'm just giving my opinion that,
Yes.
We complain about traffic all the time, and then you're going to have people going back and forth across town. And so I don't think it was well thought out originally.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle? Take it wherever you want to take it. It's going all over the place.
I mean, I don't think what we want matters. I mean, we're going to get an incremental approach, and we're going to get what comes back to us. Like we've seen that all the direction in the world from council on this topic is not going to give us what, a comprehensive ordinance that, responds to what the city needs or wants. I will say, I think the number one thing that, I do want to just state is I don't want to try and look at taxes. We said that was already something, and it shows up in here again, like over and over again. We've said we don't want that. We don't want to be harder on these businesses. We just want to make them legal. And so I'll just say that. And this is it's one of the, I'm oftentimes so proud of all of like our achievements and all of these things, and I just feel on this issue like there's just no good reason.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pozike? Number, location, broad strokes, answer like
2.5.
and good. And
I'm good with.
The next question I'm going to ask is: does staff feel like they have enough input to come up with the next level of what's going on? So this is your like last chance to kind of weigh in on where you're headed.
Yeah, why do just one? I do at least two, and I wouldn't do more than three. I saw that number 1 in 20,000 or 1 for 19, 20,000. It's the only number I saw, and I saw that 10 or 12 times in stuff I read. Didn't see any other numbers to choose.
Thank you.
So 3.
Councilmember now. Yeah.
Thank you. I already mentioned that the location part of it, so I'll say 3 because that might move us forward faster. And we have to look at that map. And so this gives us an opportunity to expand in the future to more establishments.
Thank you. And I will ask for one more comment session, but I think we're getting a sense that the hybrid, shall we call it, is really the answer. Everybody's in favor of getting something done today, and everybody's in favor or acknowledging that that's not the final answer. So thanks for pulling together 2 options that council could bring points on. Do you feel you have the feedback you're looking for?
Yes, we do. It's been very helpful. And thank you for the helpful questions we got before tonight's meeting. Hopefully you all saw the answers.
Can I ask one more question, Mayor?
Yes.
How does the council feel about an accelerated phase 2, knowing that deadlines get pushed and that really this is just one input into our zoning code? Why do we need to why do we need to push this to the end of 2025? Why can't we, update this?
I'd love to respond if I can before council weighs in.
Please.
So we gave you a conservative estimate for the next phase, but that doesn't mean we can't piggyback and we can find efficiencies, but I'm not going to commit until we heard this conversation from council. So wanted to kind of hear where council was on it, and we can come back even in June and kind of talk about what that next phase looks like. And actually, we'll be talking about our goals and priorities on April 15th, which will affect that timing. So just to be clear, I mean, and I'm just going to be, I'm going to give a little deference to my team, because it wasn't because we were doing foot dragging, Councilmember Barnacle. We also dealt with what was supposed to be a simple mobile home and tenant protections effort, which was anything but simple. And so it did affect our timing. And it's not because staff wasn't committed to our cannabis priorities, but stuff did get in the way. So that's where we are.
And that, I guess, is council weighing in that goals is the right time to talk more about a firm next bite out of the apple, but we're clear the first bite comes complete June 2024, which is like tomorrow and a half.
Pretty soon.
Okay, good. Well then, any closing comment from council before we adjourn for the evening? And staff has what they need for this ordinance. And so good workshop, everybody. Thank you, staff, for the presentation, and we are adjourned for the evening.